Hey everybody, welcome to a show. I am attempting to use new gear. I think I've got this thing finally almost fully set up. Let me know if this sounds weird in the background or if it's not coming through all that clear. I should probably get it up to monitor. I can do direct monitoring through here, but it sounds a little bit odd. So let's see how it sounds live. But yeah, coming at you with a new one just for Wednesday. We'll see if this is covering something that PineCreek dropped yesterday. Okay, that sounds pretty good. If you want me to turn it up, let me know. I don't know how this thing is going to sound in relation to the video that I'm playing, but usually PineCreek's videos sound is fine. So let's see. Yeah, I guess I'll just say hello to a few people here in the chat. Presto, what the flip? Aaron, well, I think PineCreek and TYT deserve each other. Well, he's got a lot of praise for their coverage on this particular issue, even though I think that the coverage on it from both parties is kind of overblown. First to like, thank you very much for that. It's quiet, but crispy clean. Maybe needs more gain. I don't know if that's going to do. I don't know how that's going to affect it. Oh, let's see here. Otto is here. Good to see you. God equals the square root of -1 is here. Kent Hoven CPA is here. Good to see you, Kent. Clout is here. Hello, James Apperson's here. Sorry about that. Hello, Yugoslavia. Hotel Yugoslavia is here as well. Scott Duke is here. Good to see you. Maya is here. Great to see you, Maya. Stephanie Helms is here. Hello, hello. And I think that's about everybody. So that's pretty good. All right. So, yeah, this is just going to be me ranting about PineCreek, ranting about the Young Turks, ranting about something. So the inception on this is deep. Yeah, we'll get into this one. Let me change that viewing angle around a little bit. In fact, I think what I can do here is just make that full screen. There we go. All right, let me shrink myself down here a little bit, or maybe like this. Okay. Let's see what happens. All right, here we go. This is pretty much at the very beginning of it. I'm going to play a little bit of this. I'm going to play at a regular speed, I think, because he usually speeds up the playback of the video that he's going to be covering. I'll play this a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of skip to the end because there was a bit that a user that follows Doug, and he's occasionally here. I'm blanking on his username. I don't want to use his real first name. Well, he's a caller in here. He comes on as Sean. And he has a brief conversation with him about one of Doug's other points. So I'm going to try and get through those. Okay, here we go.
Myron, why didn't you set up this screen capture? Myron is definitely not worth minimum wage in Arizona. By the way, yeah, speaking of minimum wage, California is so stupid. Feelsorryforism. You feel sorry for people.
I've got this turned up way too fast.
And so you say, okay, you want to privatize welfare and pay people $20 an hour who don't deserve it. Way overpaid. And
they don't deserve it. They just before any conservatives start to like really, stress test their blood pressure medication, the current minimum wage law, I think, in Canada right now has an exception. It only applies to restaurants and chains that have 60 locations or more. So your mom and pop burger shop, I don't think it really applies for. There's a ton of exceptions in it, but you wouldn't know that if you listen to, right-wing news. Of course, this is rewarding layabouts and slack. It's interesting. They tell you to get a job everywhere, and then when you get a job, they make you eat shit for the job you've got, and then expect shit in terms of pay and benefits. So, anytime a conservative gives you a recommendation, assume that they're out to get you, I guess. I'm starting to get, I'm getting less patient with this kind of stuff because I don't know what their point is. Like, get out there and get a job. And then when somebody does get a job, they denigrate them for wanting to get paid. I'm like, well, get a better job then. Like, okay, well, there's not a lot of better jobs. It's a gig economy now. What the hell are you talking about? There's, why do you think unions are starting to, perk up people's interest? But
Fast food places shut down.
no, they won't. In fact, a woman that they had on Fox News complaining about it, she was exempt from it, but that didn't stop her from saying she's going to have to start selling a $20 burger. A quick check at the website, she doesn't have to sell $20 burgers, and she's not selling $20 burgers. You can get a burger and fries and a drink, I think, for $17.21. Getting close, but it's not just the burger. So, and a chain that it would affect, like an In-N-Out Burger or Carl's Jr. or something like that out there, they'll be affected by it. But because they have so many locations, they're not really going to have to raise their prices beyond what they've already raised them to. I don't understand if you get inflation, or especially if you get inflation where people decide they're just going to raise prices because people are paying more, and places just decide. And we've seen this. Some of it is inflation, some of it's just the greedflation kind of thing. Why shouldn't laborers demand more money in terms of what they're providing? Why does it just all the cream get scraped off to the top? This doesn't mean it's like, because all you do is sling fries and flip burgers. Like, yeah, those are multi-billion-dollar industries, so those people are needed to do that work for now until they just automate them and they have some AI robot in there. But yeah.
And then everybody loses. Unintended consequences.
No, they don't. That's not going to happen.
Don't these liberals ever learn?
The liberals are running the fast food chains too.
One can make a pretty strong argument that it should get rid of the minimum wage altogether in the year 2024, and it opens up the market to
let it rip. That's the way it's always worked. Yeah, it's always worked that way. You just open it up, you deregulate, and then everything good happens. It's classic magical thinking. You can get this kind of deep analysis from Glenn Beck every day. I mean, PineCreek every day. Big Macs cost less in Finland than the U.S. now, and they get paid more. There is no excuse to not raise workers' wages. There isn't. The only thing is just bottom lining as much return for, the boards. So, bro, In-N-Out raised their prices like 25 cents. Okay, yeah. Who TF cares? Yeah, this is they've done studies on this. There was a couple of people out of the UC Davis that did this. And when they examined, like, if you raise the minimum wage to, like, at the time they were talking about it, I think they were setting the minimum wage at 15 or 16, it would force a chain of burger shops, essentially, I think with at least 20 locations, it would force them to, and that's not a lot of locations for a burger chain, it would force them to raise, in order to offset that raise in wages for the number of employees they had, they'd have to raise the price of all of their goods by an average of 3 cents per item. But if you listen to conservatives, if I pay an employee $20 to flip my fries, I have to charge customers $75 for that container of fries, and we all just suffer at that point. Nobody gets fries anymore.
Well, the thing is, unemployment's low, so they can get away with it, sort of. But this is the Young Turks. I was under the impression they are a
They are corporate libs.
progressive, kind of wokish.
They are corporate liberals.
Liberal channel. And I like watching.
They do claim they're on the left, but they also tend to think that a lot of the culture war stuff from left stuff, or activists like trans activists, they got in trouble for this. They think that's the hard left. They think that's the radical left. And it's like, you don't have to be a leftist to be fighting for or pushing for LGBTQ rights. You can be conservative too. Your economic idea and political philosophy does not have to line up with that. The fact that we have a problem with this is because Americans have a deeply deranged understanding of political philosophy and economic philosophies. So it all ends up getting put into this. Well, I thought they were a bunch of woke hippie weirdos. Like, Cenk used to be economic. He was like a libertarian booster, like an anarcho-capitalist type when he was younger, and then he got sick of conservative political types.
Watching people who disagree with me usually, but I watched this and I found myself in agreement with them on so many things, and this is crazy. This whole video is about, and it just came out yesterday evening, I think. This whole video is about competing Feelsorryforisms.
Maybe that's not actually what the articles were about, but well, the one from the New Yorker kind of is, but I've got issues with the New Yorker one. We'll get into that. Maya says, pretty sure Doug doesn't know what a liberal is. Well, it's interesting because when he took that political ideology test, the 4-quadrant run, it put him in and around the liberal, the kind of the centrist liberal, and he was all, oh, what does that mean? Like, dude, you're a liberal. He has no idea.
So right now in the United States of America, if you didn't know, white people feel sorry for black and Hispanic people because they're an oppressed minority.
Uh-oh, he's doing the William F. Buckley voice. I've got a crazy rich white guy voice. Maybe I'll show it to y'all later.
So they feel sorry for blacks and Hispanics. But the blacks and Hispanics don't feel that sorry for queer people. In fact, a lot of them are very religious.
So this is what someone helpfully pointed out to me. This is what is called talking out of your ass.
And probably a lot of them would say it's a sin.
Middle schoolers? Would the middle schoolers care? I mean, if they're saying that homosexuality or trans identity or gender identity are quote-unquote sins, they're probably being told that by their folks or by school officials or school teachers, which is kind of what the concern was from this school. So to give you some background on what he's about to start talking about here, what they're going to talk about. Amherst, Massachusetts, which is not a hotbed at all of, conservative types. They're very, very liberal in the sense that American liberalism is. Most of them voted for Biden last election, like 90%. There's 4 big liberal arts colleges there, hard to get into. The University of Massachusetts, Amherst, is there. I believe that's the main campus. Really big college town, lots of emphasis on education. There's an issue going on with Amherst Pelham schools where there have been allegations that some of the advisors and school counselor types and advisors have been misgendering students, dead naming students, leading their own little prayer groups, not necessarily with students, but amongst themselves, 3 or 4 of them, and then sort of condemning, declaring the LGBTQ demon seized by Jesus and this kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of, maybe some rattlesnake handling going on in the quiet town of Amherst, right? A little weird. So there's tons of these kinds of allegations going on. And the student newspaper, the Graphic, I think, which I think is the high school for that school district, their student newspaper did this long article about all of the allegations and the troubles that were going on there about LGBTQ students. There is bullying going on in the middle school, and, when it happens, it needs to get addressed. But most of their focus was on it's not really being addressed well. So flash forward a little bit, they wrote this article for their school. The Boston Globe did a piece on them, profiled the writers. It was a team of the high school paper writers, profiled them, and then it picked up on some stuff. And then a columnist named Jessica Winter for the New Yorker wrote her piece on it, and her piece is a little bit more emphasizing the fact that there's a lot more going on than just because the students that wrote the paper, their bit, are concerned about the way the school administrators and officials are handling these kinds of complaints, discipline, parent complaints, issues, all that stuff. The New Yorker piece is a little bit different in that it's talking about what they're going to talk about, which is going to be this. It's sort of a clash between, well, if we're too woke about race issues, as Doug would say, then we won't be woke enough about the LGBTQ issues. And that's not really the problem with what's going on in Amherst. And if Doug had read either, or hopefully even better, both of those articles, he would have had a very different impression, I think, of what the Young Turks are talking about here.
So when you start, when the people in power, the white oppressive men, conservative men, or
his William F. Buckley impression kind of freaks me out a little bit.
And liberal men are
There's
in
a little
power.
PTSD. Sounds like my youth,
They tend to hire black and Hispanic oppressed minorities, and then they find out, but they don't like queer people, and now we got a problem.
None of this is particular to the issue that's going on here. Like, you have kids that are doing bullying at the schools, and some of the kids that are doing the bullying are from Latino backgrounds or black backgrounds. The issue is whether or not the school, at least it seemed to be based on the article that I read from the original high school paper, the student paper. Their concern is like, this isn't, middle school has more of this than you're going to get in high school. Middle schoolers are awful. It seemed to be acknowledged by any of the articles I read. But they're like, something really needs to be done about it. And a variety of factors, from parents kind of dragging their feet on it, not wanting to cause trouble, to school administrators not knowing how to deal with it because it becomes a he said, she said, they said kind of thing. Then it turned into an even bigger problem, and then it was everyone saying versus everyone else saying that this is an issue, and people calling for people to get fired and this kind of stuff. Typical school boards in America kind of conflicts. So it's not this whole thing. This is getting blown up out of proportion, I think, by the Young Turks, and especially by Doug. He's grabbing this like it's a piece of bacon.
And the same thing happens with what we're seeing with the Israel-Palestine issue. Since the queers feel so oppressed in the United States of America, they feel sorry for the people who live in Gaza. But the problem is, the people who live in Gaza don't feel sorry for the queer people. In fact,
they're aware, Doug. That doesn't mean they can't sympathize with the plight that they have, or turn a blind eye to innocent people in that country being targeted by the Israeli military. This is a point he does not need to make. This is well, they're not on your team and they wouldn't approve of your lifestyle anyway, so I don't know why you give a crap about them, because they're human beings with empathy. Right?
in fact, if they had their way, they'd push them off the top of a building. So it's competing Feelsorryforisms. And white
Daniel Cooper. As a parent of former middle schoolers, they are horrible. Well, yeah. Yeah, Michael says, I don't feel sorry for oppressed minorities. It's just demonstrably harmful to our society to have oppressed classes and demographics, and then elevated classes and demographics. Yeah. And then Doug would probably ask him, well, why? Why is that a bad thing?
white liberals, they tend to be full of guilt, and they feel sorry for illegal immigrants. By the way,
keep in mind, he's going to make a statement later on where he doesn't think that liberals shame people, but almost all of this is based on the fact that these guys believe that liberals are about shaming people. It's really weird.
Wait, I'm better than, I would say, 99% of illegal immigrants. There might be a few sneaking in there. And I got a short that says why. So anyhow, you got the white liberals who feel sorry for the illegal immigrants. And they also feel sorry for the blacks and the Hispanics in this country who are citizens. But the blacks and Hispanics don't feel sorry for the illegal immigrants. So now we got this competing Feelsorryforism. It is...
I don't think that's a monolith, so that's a little bit weird. I mean, I'm sure the fact that he's been guilty of doing this kind of thing before. He did this when he started doing the kind of the model minority myth. The idea like, well, hey, just look at these Asians. They're doing great. In fact, I think he'll do this here too. I don't know what these other groups are having a problem with. And it's like, that's a way of pitting two group, in a way that you don't want to actually, you want to pretend that you're beyond this pitting groups against each other. You just did it. You just effing did it. Doug does it quite frequently.
It's fun to watch. And all this can be cleared up if you start shifting to being more conservative. Oh, I did a poll. What are the results? Oh, you guys are scared to vote. But anyhow, let's see here.
No, they're not.
Who do you feel more sorry for?
He did this poll. He'll pop the... Yeah. Who do you feel more sorry for? From 9 minutes ago. He uses the Q word again. I don't know why he keeps using that word. Like, you just use LGBTQ or the gay community or something. The queers, I think that's really more their word. 20%, blacks, Hispanics, 8%, Asians, 25%, whites, 47%. some real problems over it. And the thing that interests me about this is these are the kind of tough love kind of people. But then why do you feel sorry for any of the whites? Well, they're just understood and they're not getting their fair shake and blah 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 blah. Like, how do you know that? How do you know that they're just not applying themselves hard enough, like Doug would say? Well, it's the DEI that's keeping them down. That sounds like a lame excuse. That sounds like the kind of excuse a loser would say. Bootstraps, bitches. Play through the pain.
Queers, 20%. Blacks and... What? What? Sorry, blacks and Hispanics.
This sounds like a drunk uncle bit from SNL. Yeah, that's a pretty good comparison. He wouldn't be a shock jock if he used the PC terms. That's kind of what he's doing here. This is kind of like bad shock jock stuff.
8% feel sorry for you. Asians, 24%. What kind of white supremacists watch my channel?
All of them.
Half of you feel sorry for white people? Don't you know they have white privilege?
I was here for this live, and I helpfully added, like, you can acknowledge a group's privilege and still pity them.
This is disgusting.
Erwin Pimental, welcome to my show. Who is this guy? This is Doug. He is a conservative atheist, and he does counter apologetics, street epistemology when he's talking about, talking out against Christianity mostly. Other organized religions, I think he's less critical of, kind of like me, former Mennonite. But he's also got some, his politics are pretty much just like warmed up Fox News hit piece bits. So surprised he didn't call them Oriental. I mean, why not? Why not? Yes, Shock Jock needs more views for that dopamine. Yeah.
What's going on? Myron, explain to me why people feel sorry for white people.
Because you tell them to.
Oh, Myron said white people are the only people you can really discriminate against nowadays in the United States of America.
Is that true? Can I get a vote? I didn't know that.
What's that? Yeah, white people are the only people you can swear at and demonize, call racist, homophobe, bigots.
I mean, just to do it, I don't think that's cool. I don't think you can just do that, can you? I mean, we saw people doing that to people, white people, during COVID. People who wore masks were being called bigots and perverts by, let's face it, fans of Doug's. Some, maybe. I don't know. Maybe some. And was it okay? Sometimes those led to some police encounters, so I don't think that's true.
Can't really do that with minorities? I see what you're getting at. Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense.
Oh, Fox News, that makes more sense. Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I really do think he needs to own up to this. I don't think he's honest with his fans or viewers or anyone about the amount of like Fox News that he watches or Newsmax. He's admitted that he's not a reader, so I know he's not reading. I don't think he's reading Reason Magazine or reading the National Review. Maybe quick synopses or something. Maybe he is. I don't know. National Review used to occasionally be kind of thoughtful. Now it's just shit. When Jonah Goldberg started there, it turned into a real rag. I'm dating myself because I remember who Jonah Goldberg is. But he does the William F. Buckley voice, and William F. Buckley was the voice of National Review for a while, I think. I can't remember if he was ever an editor for it, but it doesn't matter. Anyway.
This is so much fun. Have any progressives still here? Have I scared all the woke people away? Okay, let's get into this video and see how the young Turks are becoming they're shifting more conservative.
Wars that have been playing out at Amherst Regional Middle School in Massachusetts. And man, has it been a nightmare. So it's tearing teachers, administrators, students, and parents apart. And it really has to do with identitarianism and which group in the hierarchy should be cared for the most.
Yeah, see, that's exactly my poll.
Yeah, that's not exactly what's going on. The issue is, like I said before, the original article that comes out is clearly about from the students, from the student paper, is about how the school is dealing with allegations of bullying perpetrated against the LGBTQ students in the middle school. That's pretty much their number one concern. And are there some of these advisors that are kind of getting away with doing things that are kind of in line with that bullying themselves, dead naming, misgendering, etc., and how responsive was the school's administrative system in dealing with these issues? The New Yorker article gets into some of the internal administrative politics of what they're going to do to try to get some of these teachers fired or disciplined, and who moved and who resigned and all this kind of stuff, which is interesting because that means the student article from the student paper really basically lit a dumpster on fire. And now a lot of people are scurrying. So
Cared for the most is who do you feel the most sorry for?
And of course, that leads to conflict. So here's a little background about the school itself. Just over 12% of the city's residents are Black or Hispanic. About 70% are white and roughly 13% are Asian. So those are the demographics in that area, in that school district. But the public school district is more racially diverse than the wider community. About a quarter of students are Black or Hispanic, in part because of the number of white and Asian families that opt for private or charter schools.
Yeah, there you go. So if you're an oppressed minority,
which I seem to remember, didn't Doug and I think even Nate the lawyer had kind of taken this stance that, hey, those schools, the private and charter schools that are out there, those are good for minority families because they can get that public money and convert it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to afford those private schools, but they can get into those charter schools. So I wonder how that's happening in Amherst, Massachusetts, where that stuff's going that way. And the fact that a quarter of the students are Black or Hispanic, that is still not that high. Let's face it, it's kind of pretty overwhelmingly white school district.
and you don't want to be that way. If you're poor and you don't want to be that way, do what the rich people do. Work your way up so you don't need public school. Easy.
I had to chime in at this point. I probably should bring the comments up because at one point he yells at me. But my comments are a little bit out of whack. But I think I mentioned the charter schools rely on public funding. Right, the whole point is that it's not going to separate you from public school. It's a way for the private sector to introduce competition and free market ingenuity and such into the public school and really light a fire under its ass and really innovate. And it has shown that it doesn't do that at all. Charter schools absolutely rely on public funding. Newsflash: a lot of private schools do too. There are very few that turn down state and federal aid. I think the last one at like a high school level, I don't know, but it used to be I think the only private university in the country that turned down all federal aid was Hillsdale College.
Easy for you to say, Doug. Well, maybe think twice before having unprotected sex. And if you're against abortion...
Donna Murphy makes a good point. I was the only black kid in my school. 25% sounds awesome to me. Yeah, it does. But the young Turks are focusing on this for well, it's only about this much percent. It kind of reflects Amherst kind of reflects like the national average. But then the schools actually, if you think about it, they're a lot more diverse. Okay, so what does this have to do with the point of the student paper was that the school wasn't dealing with LGBTQ student bullying well enough. They weren't dealing with accusations of bullying against those types of students. They really didn't get into this. The New Yorker did, and the New Yorker article kind of turns it into this, well, now you've got this post-COVID hostile culture war aggressive teachers unions, blah blah. Just really just kind of dumping everything into it. I mean, it just makes Amherst sound like a hotbed of insanity. And I don't know if that's entirely the case. I think this is kind of nitpicking, because if you're dealing with like middle schools and before, really K through 8, and you look at just some of the enormous amount of insanity that has been popping up in student council meetings and town meetings about their schools, it's insane. This seems bad, that they're not able to really come to any kind of issue with this. I mean, because at one point somebody was like, well, the one woman that should be held responsible for it, if you're going to hold her responsible for it, you can't because she's black. Well, that might be an irrelevant thing to bring up at this point. I mean, is she dead naming LGBTQ kids? Is she not disciplining the kids in school that are bullying the LGBTQ kids? I mean, what's going on here?
Doubly think twice before any unprotected sex. Think about if I get pregnant and because of my religious values, I'm not going to get an abortion, and therefore this kid's going to be brought into this poor neighborhood where there's poor schools. I mean, think twice. Looks like the white and Asians, they don't want anything to do with public schools. I've said this before. Public schools, most of the time, are for people who can't afford their own kids. Like,
by that metric, the vast majority of people would not be able to afford kids in this country, Doug. If they had to pay for private education, K through 12, they would be in a world of hurt. He goes on to say what he thinks. Or, I don't know if it's in this video or another one. Like, if you're making, if you've got 3 kids and you're not making $160,000 a year, you're probably uncomfortable. I know somebody who's got 4 kids and makes over $160,000 a year, and they would be very uncomfortable if they did what he did and private schooled all of them. So his math is deeply, deeply effed in the B.
Like, imagine everybody who had children in the United States had $1 million cash in the bank, plus investments, whatever. Do you really think they'd send their kids to public school? Maybe, like if it's a really good public school, but probably not. Right?
Nicola with the trolling comment. This does seem to be, this sums up what PineCreek is saying. The solution to people not affording school is to send the kids back to the mines. Send it back to the fields. Make them harvest again, Make American kids farmers again.
So how do you fix this problem? I don't know.
Throw money at it. That's the easiest way to do it. I don't understand what these guys don't. The problem for the parents is to throw money at private school and your kids. That's what Doug just said. Work your way up, and then you have enough money, you can throw a ton of money at getting your kids into the richest, bestest school that you can find. Okay. It sounds like the solution is to throw a lot of money at it. Maybe try that on a mass level. Throw a bunch of money at it. This is just Doug kind of beating around the bush and like, well, maybe some people don't belong in public education. Maybe they don't deserve to be.
I mean, maybe if people can't afford their own kids, if they can't even afford to feed them, clothe them, house them, they can't educate them, and if the government's providing all that money for them, here's an interesting question. In what sense are those kids theirs?
That's a psychotic view of money. This is the typical, if the government gives you a food card, right, with money on it, and then you go out and use that food card to buy whatever you wanted, some bureaucrat steps forward and like, well, that was never your money to begin with. I mean, we gave it to you, right? But I don't want you to have the freedom to use the money that became yours on things that you choose. I want to choose what you buy for you. That's when you can tell that fascist to pound sand quickly, right? Because they're crazy. They tried making this. Hobby Lobby tried making this argument with, with birth control, and people were sentimental to it. They're, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, if I'm paying my so and so's X amount of dollars, that's one thing. But then I give them a benefit plan, and that benefit plan allows them access to healthcare procedures that I find positively modern, which for me, as somebody who barely acknowledges the invention of witchcraft and would like to go back to the era of, leeches and stuff, and checking the humors, dumping mustard seed and lemon juice into open wounds to make you scream and pass out, that's the kind of medicine that I prefer, and I don't want anyone getting anything other than that. And if you're using my benefits, I get to determine what you do with your health care. Like, I'm sorry, at what point did your health care or their health care become your responsibility after you paid for it for them? It was a benefit you gave to them to use as they saw fit. And then people actually bought this. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to make the agreement that, okay, I paid a guy, he was a great worker, but then I found out, you know what he spends his money on a lot? Model trains. Idle hands, man. Idle hands, the thing of the devil. I fired that guy. Not only did I fire him, I demanded my money back. He used my money on the wrong stuff. Psychos. These people are psychos. They need to learn to let go.
It's the saying, if you buy something, it's yours. Does that apply to people? I'm not talking slavery here. I'm not.
I'm sure this message is going to go out great even for conservatives. Like, if you send your kids to public schools, the government's own your. Do you know who believes this? Fundamentalist Christians. Fundamentalist Christian nationalists are like, well, I'm not sending my kids to those schools. Those indoctrination camps? My kid's going to come back and try to DEI me or something. Tell me I'm a bigot. It's wrong to think that I can overthrow the government with my AK-47 and my Mountain Dew silencer on the end of it, Does he understand that young people can't both live alone and afford to eat right now? He doesn't. He really doesn't. And he lives in Arizona, so, I mean, he has the opportunity to check out some real poverty. Granted, I wonder if Doug uses the same logic of, if I paid for your food, I own your logic when dating women. Right? Psychos, man. I mean, he listens to Andrew Wilson. He thinks that Andrew Wilson makes good points.
Not really. I'm talking about, like, if it's certain areas of the United States, there's so many after-school programs because we got to keep these kids away from their home life because it's just so terrible, or their parents are not even home or whatever because they have to work. In what sense are those kids even theirs, the parents? Maybe the solution is to pull those kids out of those homes and put them in Asian homes.
No. At this point, he's not even joking about this issue well. Like, I'm sure that Asians... there's only like 20. We only make up like 20% of the population. How many kids do we have to take in? I mean, just do the math. Doug has the compassion of a turnip. Jay disagrees with you. He thinks that turnips might exceed Doug on the empathy level. I agree with you both somehow.
There's woke liberals right now. They're having aneurysms right now. They just like
aneurysms. Yes, they.
But maybe they get a better education, right?
Model minority math.
Like, cultures have different strengths and weaknesses, and when it comes to education, it seems like the Asian culture is supreme. Like, as far as test scores go in the United States, SAT scores.
Supreme how? I mean,
we ought to, if our goal is to get a better education program, emulate those Asians. I love the Asians. Some of my best friends are Asian. True story.
They're all pretending with you, Doug. I don't know if that's true. That's just a mean thing to say. Daniel Cooper asks, unrelated to Doug's cough wisdom, did you see the eclipse or the totality? Where I was, I couldn't see the totality. I'm in the kind of the middle of Michigan, so I think the closest spot for me where you could catch the totality on its path was part of Toledo, Ohio. And that was where, you actually feel the temperature drop a little bit. But it did, where I was, I did kind of it got hazy here. It got a little weird for a couple of hours. Got dark for about 20, 30 minutes. Not super dark, and then lightened back up, and it was kind of over for us. So kind of disappointing, but still cool. But no, I wasn't really in the path of totality, so I couldn't witness it. I had to watch, like, you know, videos and stuff of it happening. Big incel energy, to be sure.
So the white nation.
I kind of wonder, I just want to mention this because I knew people that went to really good schools, and they were Asian, and they were American. Some of them were first, second generation, and went to the best schools their parents could afford. They got into schools, and their parents paid for everything. It was completely foreign to me that this would happen. My parents were like, we got 5 kids. That's right. I got 4 brothers and sisters. And they're like, we can't afford to send one. We ain't sending y'all. They don't talk like that, but, you know, it's kind of that sentiment. And, you know, these guys, you know, some of these kids, you know, 2 or 3 siblings, and their parents are like, every single one of these going to college. They'd yell at them for imagining doing something other than going to college, and they paid for it completely. And those parents, what did they do? They worked 70 and 80 hours a week at the laundry mat that they owned, which is not a bad deal. Incredibly hard work that earned them 0 respect. 0. But they did it so that their kids would not have to work 70 and 80 hours in a laundromat. They could work as surgeons or lawyers or, you know, politicians, power players. They were willing to do that for their kids. It was, you know, kind of a thing for them. I wonder how many people would want to do that and eat the kind of shit you have to eat running a laundromat. And keep in mind that business makes good money, but the parents did not live well. You know, they were run down, stressed out. They worked long hours. I guess we all need to do that for the economy. You know, so all of our kids can go to the best schools, even though they can't all fit in them, and they can all become the same kind of doctor and lawyer, even though we don't need that. Doug's social engineering requires a lot of work.
Asian students are going to private or charter schools. They're focusing on academics. Then you look at this public school and they're riddled with culture war nonsense. Okay. And because of that culture war nonsense, you have various groups basically at war with one another because their interests are in conflict with one another.
It sounds just like me.
So, and I should note that this is a very liberal area of the country.
So their title, Culture War Conundrum Tears Liberal School District Apart. The thing that's tearing the school district apart are the issues going on with the bullying against LGBTQ students and a lot of it not being addressed. That was what the student paper illustrated. Like, this is a problem. School's not really dealing with it. Now that the school is dealing it, this is being focused on, well, these people can't get their acts together and they can't figure out what's more or less woke when they have to deal with this or whatever. And most of it is just corporate liberal hand-wringing and ass coverage. It's not complicated. I've watched this happen in offices that I've worked in. It's not complicated at all. If you really want to see this in action, you ought to see this with conservatives. When conservatives have a litmus test and it pivots like this, they haven't had one in a while, but it's hilarious if you get a chance, when you can see it. Like the eclipse. So just weird allusions to eugenics on Doug's part. When does he start arguing that pauperism is genetic? I mean, he kind of does. I've heard him kind of get close to saying that.
And
of course, that's why there's problems.
So go ahead, Jake.
There's identity politics.
I mean, I agree. Amherst is a very liberal town, and part of their liberalism is a problem, especially the kind of just hand-waved corporate liberalism crap that they've got going on there. The kind of corporate liberalism we get from people like Doug.
That is played on the left. And this story.
The only reason that Doug is getting away from this is because for his particular audience, he can just sort of like feed his fifis here and embrace authoritarianism, because that's probably a bigger dopamine hit. I mean, the liberalism stuff has been played out for a long time. So why not just embrace, diet fascism?
There's a really interesting intersection where those identity politics clash.
Yes.
And then people don't know what to do because they're making decisions not based on logic or facts, but based on identity. And that's what gets to the absurdity of sometimes
Bye-bye critical race theory.
the extreme left.
From the Young Turks.
That has absolutely nothing to do with critical race theory. Again, there's got nothing. I'm going to go off camera a bit and do something that'll really trigger Doug.
This perspective. I mean, we shouldn't base things on identity, but identity is such a big part of who we are.
That came out weird. I'm just going to turn the camera off and grab something real. Wait, that came off wrong too. I'll be right back. I'm just going to play this a little bit.
All right. I am a white man. That's my identity.
And what it has resulted in. Unfortunately, this is an excellent example of it.
So around
Maybe, I don't know. I don't really know that it is. I don't entirely trust the article that they did. Fabio makes a great point. Which Asians is he talking about? I'm pretty sure most of Asian countries have a working public school system. Heck, most of civilized countries have working public schools. Right. This is a uniquely American problem that Americans think the easiest way to solve is to just eliminate the source of frustration, which is public education, rather than doing what they should have done a long time ago, which is fund the hell out of it. Doug agreed with that. If you want your kids to have a great education, throw money at their education. Get a job and work to have that money. You can just dump, just pour ducats over those kids and their education. Send them to the best school that you can afford. Maybe even take out a loan for it. But keep it within your means. You don't want to be one of those, you don't want to get dragged down with debt and have to look for a bailout from the government in the form of bankruptcy. Oh, no. So, yeah, I mean, when American conservatives talk like this, it's just this interesting thing of, well, we've tried nothing except destroying the public schools, and that seems to be doing an awesome job at making the schools suck. So since that's how things work, we just ought to get rid of the public schools altogether. Like, we built it to spill. It's leaking all over the place. I'm tired of mopping it up. Why don't we just get rid of the bucket and the water? Right? I mean, kids can wait to learn to read when they're 20. That's not going to affect the country at all.
around 2014, a gentleman by the name of Michael Morris became assistant superintendent, and he decided to introduce a new administrative role at this school, okay? The assistant superintendent of diversity, equity, and human resources.
Ugh.
So in 2017, he ends up hiring a woman by the name of Doreen Cunningham, who is black, for the role. Under Cunningham, Amherst instituted a two-step hiring process that was actually meant to increase diversity among workers at this middle school, okay?
Here's a very simple question to ask the audience here. Why is diversity good? I'm not saying it's bad. I'm asking a question.
Aren't you? I mean, there's things that you imply when you ask certain things. Why is diversity good to begin with? I mean, why not just get rid of it? Like, because you don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber. For this reason. The reason that he doesn't want to deal with the woke thing is because that the woke people are surrounded in an echo chamber and they're not exposed to a diversity of opinions to get themselves out of it. That's an interesting position to take. Then he turns around and asks, why is diversity important? As if it hasn't occurred to him. He's asking a question that kind of challenges the point that he makes about people being in lockstep in echo chambers. This is the stupidest question to ask if you've come out and said, well, these people are just locked away in their own little ideology over here and they're just not thinking outside the box. I would agree. And what's the easiest way to get exposed to things outside the box? Diversity. Doug, Jesus. Just try to, if you watch this, please just try to track your own previous standards and positions. Please.
How would you articulate, as I'm speaking mostly to the woke progressives listening in, why is diversity good? See if you can articulate an answer in your head and then type it out in the live stream chat. Why is diversity good? And let me warn you, this is a trap question, and I'm asking you to walk in the trap and type it in the live stream chat now. Why is diversity good?
You walked in your own trap by asking that question. You contradicted your own points before about leftists being stuck in a woke echo box of ideological self-delusion, right? It's not a trap for somebody who answers the question as long as they know why you're stumbling all over yourself to make these kinds of weird, like, aha, gotcha, lib. Gotcha. Like, no, you didn't. I'm trying to figure out how you missed the point that you've been talking about how diversity is a great thing up until it involves people's skin color. And then all of a sudden, you're wondering why, implicitly, you should even be bothered. I don't need to think about class. People that fail to live up to my standards of excellence in terms of finance, economics, and just making a good wage, they deserve to suffer that way. The market's decided that they suck. I don't need to know what they have to say. I can isolate myself in a little box over here with people who win at the economy and never have anything to complain about. What could be wrong with that? I don't know.
That was the whole point. It was like a double-blind hiring process. One committee would choose candidates and another ask the applicants a uniform set of questions.
This is really fascinating to me. The part that he's playing here, and this is the beginning of the bit for them, they're just going into the part of the article talking about the demographics of this place and who gets hired and who doesn't, instead of actually setting up the background for what this issue is. They never once mentioned the student paper. I haven't heard it anyway. Maybe they did and I missed it. But I didn't hear them give that background on it. This started with students writing in a student paper about the issues going on in the school district, and then it got picked up and it became a little bit more national. Conservatives were complaining about it, naturally. The Boston Globe wrote a piece about it, profiled the writers, like I mentioned before, and then this column picked it up from the New Yorker. And the thing that they're fixated on is the hiring styles and practices going on, the HR things happening in here, because they know that is what's going to get the views from people who are looking to serve up DEI on some kind of platter. We need to put a bullet in the head of whoever came up with DEI, because it's the second coming of communism, and it has absolutely nothing to do with that. DEI at its best is basically just corporate liberal speak to get people to not say stupid shit that will get them fired, force them to be fired by HR, which can be expensive and inconvenient and horrible, and also not open up the employer to lawsuits and liabilities. It's just covering your ass for the most part in a lot of corporate industries and in a lot of agencies like education, unfortunately. The spirit of it, I think, is good. Most of what's being applied is just corporate ass covering. That's it. And they unfortunately even have to do this in states with right to work. I was complaining about this with my brother. In states with right to work laws where you can fire somebody without really any reason, they have to deal with the problem that even though people should understand, if you're an employer in a right to work state and you want to get rid of somebody, you don't tell them why you're getting rid of them. That's the last thing you have to do. If they ask, you just provide them with corporate speak. What we're doing here, we've found that we don't think that you're a great fit for the company, and more so, we don't think that you're quite happy here, and we want you to have an opportunity to be more fulfilled in your job. So this is an opportunity for you to go out and find something that we think is a better match for you. It's been great, working with you, and we wish you the best. Connect back with us in the future if you feel like your corporate, your career goals circle back around this way. You don't even have to go into that much detail, but that's all you have to give. And it ding-dongs in these states would be like, oh, I got rid of them because they were insert horrible, offensive thing there, opening them up to an unlawful firing practice. They were discriminated against. That's mostly what they, like, even in right-to-work states, there were people that needed DEI stuff to know, like, look, all you have to do to let them go is just let them go. You don't have to go and tell them that you don't like their politics, you don't like their religion, you don't like their absence of religion, you don't understand why that turban is on their head, maybe quit, stop going after Sikhs that way, this kind of stuff. And they'd be, oh, I'd do it anyway, it's America, That's why we have DEI courses in corporate America. Doug suffers from the sad delusion that in an authoritarian society, he'd be one of the people in authority. He'd be in a camp amazed that the leopards are eating his face. Yeah. Did Cenk finally end his run for president? Yes, I believe he did. Nicholas says he did too. Yeah, I think he pretty much had to.
Resumes were not reviewed.
I would love to see those questions
ahead of time as part of this hiring form set of questions. Resumes were not reviewed ahead of time as part of this hiring process.
Resumes not reviewed ahead of time?
I think this actually in the articles has more to do with the fact that Denise Cunningham, who took a lot of flack for a lot of this kind of stuff, she was in a position of hiring people, and she was kind of doing it on the grounds of diversity and stuff. But she was friends with two of the counselors. If you find these, look up this Amherst Pelham thing, you can find the New Yorker article, and you can find a copy of the student article that is, that this all started from. But you'll see that she was kind of friendly with two of the student advisors that were having these prayer meetings and they were it was alleged that they were the ones dead naming and misgendering and all this other stuff. But she's basically talking here like, well, Denise Cunningham was just like hiring her friends. That's all she's doing. It's a very long way of explaining like, yeah, Denise was kind of like, filling in roles with people that she personally knew. And it might have been the case that those two advisors were, beneficiaries of that action. So, but again, okay, she did that. That's probably not great. Probably is against the school's hiring and firing policies, HR policies, but she's the head of HR. The main point was, what are they doing about dealing with allegations that LGBTQ students are being bullied on a semi-regular basis? And some of the bullying activities are coming from Denise Cunningham and other people that she's friendly with. I think one of these people officiated her wedding or her kid's wedding. They're all very close.
I hope at some point they were reviewed.
And the two committees did not communicate with one another about the applicants that they were reviewing. And
Nikolai, I think, nails this better. Why is diversity good? To be facetious, because white people's food lacks flavor. It does. It does. I like diversity because I love shawarma. Give me anything from the Middle East, I will probably love it. And Asia. And Africa, for that matter. North African food. East African food. Ethiopian food. I've never had South African food, other than rooibos tea, which is good. You can miss me with like French food. I can take or leave.
Considering
in the context of education, hiring teachers, support staff, administration in schools. So we'll keep it specific. Why is diversity good in schools?
For positions within the school. Now, to Cunningham's credit, this did in fact increase diversity within the school. So Cunningham said that she trained anyone who was going to be part of the committees was trained to look at their bias. Multiple district employees told me that Cunningham often screened the candidates herself, though, and made final decisions, even overruling principals at times. She denied this, saying, quote, "I'm not the one who hired anyone."
No, the rest of the article seems to indicate she was the one that hired anyone. So you have your first absurdity here where she says, I'm going to.
That's definitely. Doug sounds butthurt at people who mock his self-appointed superiority. He is doing the exact kind of feel-sorry-forism he rails against. I mean, he was even kind of having a fun time with it. His audience is like, oh, I feel sorry. 49% of us feel sorry for white people in America. And he's like, well, there you go, progressives. You're going to call these people a bunch of racists? Like, no, but I am going to call them kind of, they might be kind of dumb. Let's be fair. I do feel bad for for a lot of people that are struggling in poverty, regardless of what their racial background is. I don't get the impression Doug gives a shit that they're poor.
I'm going to train all of you guys because I don't want you to have any bias. We want these hiring decisions to be perfect. They go through the whole training, etc. And then she's like, yeah, ignore that. I'm just hiring them. Go, you. I like you guys. Come on.
Yeah. No. It's.
Come on.
Now, by 2023, the percentage of minority staffers at Amherst district went from 20% to 34%. So there was an increase in diversity. It's just that it appears that she hired some of her friends.
Of course.
And her friends had certain
biases.
Culture war biases that conflicted with certain identities represented within the student body.
So she hired Christian friends, and those Christian friends don't like the LGBTQ stuff. That is indicated even in the student paper. That's kind of their problem. Like, look, it's a middle school, bullying happens, middle schoolers can be jerks and a-holes. The problem is you've got some advisors, student advisors, administrative types that, given their cultural biases as kind of fundamental as Christians, are not going to separate their religious convictions from the job they're doing as civil workers working for a public school system, and are probably turning a blind eye to this. Maybe, possibly, likely. That's the point. So they're kind of getting to the heart of this now. We're 14 minutes in.
Yeah. Look, it's one thing if you're going to do DEI, and we've got our issues with the way some.
For those of you from Idaho, DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Well, that is.
They know what it is too. You can work at those Joe jobs that he has no respect for. You will get DEI training, at McDonald's.
Implemented. It's another thing when you say you're going to do DEI and then you just hire your friends. Okay, and then that makes everyone hate DEI 10,000 times more.
Yeah, I mean, me and the young Turks are simpatico So far, we're in agreement.
Okay, so there's a layers of problems in this story. Go ahead.
Also, I should note that many of the new hires who happen to be, a more diverse group of employees were paraprofessionals. I've never heard that word before, but apparently they're low-paid hourly employees who provide support to
Teacher aides. My daughter is one of those.
credentialed, like full-time faculty.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the DI.
Yeah, I think in some of those cases, though, they're serving as sort of more like part-time admin, not part-time faculty. But I mean, HR would be hiring both. So yeah, it's possible. And when schools start doing that kind of stuff, it can cause rifts with teachers' unions. Oftentimes, teachers' unions will have they'll have it set up where you can have a certain percentage of people. Like you can have a certain percentage of temps. You can have a certain percentage of people who are full-time yet not fully covered. And they can kind of treat it as a probationary thing and bring them on as a, what they would call, like in some circles, like an FTE, a full-time employee versus a PT, a part-time or a whatever. Yeah. But certain administrations, depending on where they go with that, can abuse those quite a bit. I live in Indiana, which is a right-to-work state. A guy just got fired a few weeks ago from my work for having to take a break for medical reasons. Yeah. Yeah, they don't have to give a reason. Most of their reasons are bad. Opus DEI. That might be the kind of DEI that Doug might go for. Maybe.
Yeah, I think for one more second too, Anna, because look, I think that a lot of people, including myself, to be honest, are starting to get the sense that, wait, is DEI actually to help minorities across the country? Because I'm in favor of that. Or is it to help elite African Americans and minorities get the jobs they want?
Very good question, Cenk. Very good question. Because my son and daughter, they have darker skin. And they come from very good, stable homes. I mean, they are, like, if you know that you got a race and you got the starting line, my kids are halfway already down the field. I mean, they got such a big head.
So they're privileged. I thought he didn't acknowledge that privilege was a thing.
Head start over most kids nowadays.
Megalite Jack, fuck that shit. All you have to do is make shit up. It happens all the time in an employment at will state. Yeah, and it did here. My point earlier was that the reason that DEI even is emphasized in at will states is because people, instead of just making something up or giving just the bland corporate, we think you'd be better off pursuing opportunities in a position that better suited your talents and skills. They would say the quiet parts out loud. I didn't like, I don't want any Muslims up in here. I only hire people who fear and love Jesus. And it's like, yeah, that part, even though it's the right to work state, shit you're saying right now violates some federal laws, pal. Maybe shut the hell up. And they couldn't. So the DEI people would kind of come in and be like, here's how it works. This is why you need to respect the diversity and inclusion and this is why diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not actually admitting to being the horrible racist bigot that you are. Just speak in these bland corpo terms, so the company is not liable when you let them go. We've got them right where we want them. We can let them go for any reason we want. If it's a reason that will make us liable to a lawsuit, don't say it out loud. And people would, and they needed the training. I'm not saying that's the kind of DEI training I got. The DEI training that I got the impression from the people that were giving it to me, they believe in it. And like I said, I sympathize with it too because I happen to like things that work that way. What he's tilting against and what he's tilting against is the idea that, these quotas are crazy and they're just doing this because they want the appearance of diversity, but they don't really care about actual diversity. That's going to be the next thing to go. Like, oh yeah, well we want our company to be 12 to 14% African American, but we would be uncomfortable if those 12 to 14% of employees were also anti-LGBTQ because they were Pentecostals. Well, here's the problem. There's no issue with that level of diversity at your workplace as long as the people understand, like, you have your religious beliefs. They've got no place here while you're working for me because this is a place of work and we are in a secular society. So while you're on my dime, your money is yours to do with as you please. But when you're here, you can check that shit for later. Them's the breaks. That's how it's supposed to work. Anybody trying to push back against that and say, well, you gotta be all about. You gotta accept me completely. No, they don't. They can accept you just fine. Not on the clock. You don't get to bully other coworkers. You don't get to try to convert people with your religion while you're on the clock. Nobody gets that break. Christians keep pushing for it, but
do you think DEI is for them? Do you think they need it?
If you're talking about Indian food, absolutely, all day, every day. In fact, I should order some right now.
Right? And so again, that's why this story is an interesting example, because she just uses DEI as an excuse to hire her Black and Latino friends. I like the idea of Blacks and Latinos being hired.
What, you like the idea of Blacks and Latinos being hired?
Do you not, Doug? Would it be bad to hire them?
I hope he doesn't mean in lieu of qualification. I like the most
Did he say that?
qualified people being hired.
Right. And if you live in a country where you can rig the goals so that only the people that are the most qualified happen to look the most qualified, you'll find out that doesn't always work out great.
Here's another question. Let's say you had a
Again, that diversity thing is about making sure you don't lock yourself into an echo chamber, but Doug is practically sprinting towards one at this point.
school, and you have that perspective. The most qualified people are hired. And let's say it turns out to be 100% Asian. Asian principal, Asian vice principal, Asian counselors, Asian teachers, Asian teacher helpers. Everybody is Asian. Question, what's the problem with that?
I don't think there's any problem with it. Why would there be? Now, let's say that all of them are conservative Baptist Christians originally from South Korea, or maybe first generation, and they're all very conservative Baptist Christians from South Korea. And they do not like any of the LGBTQ stuff. And they start having problems with kids questioning their identities or even bringing it up, or teachers even bringing it up. And allegations of abuse or bullying or insults and these kinds of things just kind of get, shoved under the rug. Guess what you have there in that little echo chamber? An echo chamber, Doug. You got a total lack of diversity at that place. You'd probably, he didn't have a problem with, he doesn't have a problem with diversity as long as there's a bunch of wealthy kids at a wealthy school surrounded by all their wealthy peers. That's perfectly fine, right? I'm sure there's plenty of places where the majority, has he never been to UCLA? He's not that far from it. UCLA, I think, is 65% Asian as far as the student body goes. That happens. You get those kinds of breakdowns. Just like you get some schools like, Creighton University in Nebraska. I think that's 94% white or something like that, or at least it used to be. It might be more diverse now.
Anyone? Are you against Asians?
Playing this kind of reverse, this reverse racism thing does not really work well for him. He would probably have a problem with this if that school was turning down his kids, even though his kids could do the work and he had the money. He was throwing all the money at it, and they turned down his kids because they don't match the profile. Telling me he would not have a problem with that? The fact that they all happen to be representing a particular race or ethnic group or even a national background, that's one thing. The fact that they're all setting themselves up to be that way intentionally to shield themselves from outside groups can get a little dicey if you're talking about a public school. If you want to make a private school where you exclude people and you want to make it totally private so it doesn't involve any public funding, go right ahead and knock yourself out.
I'm not. I think if they're the best at something, let's hire all Asian people to run schools. But Doug, then the kids, they can't relate to their teachers because they look different.
The argument being made by conservatives right now, if the teachers say that they're LGBTQ, is that their students can't relate to them. So what the hell is he talking about? That's precisely what conservatives are saying. Well, these people make my kid uncomfortable. Your kid or you? Well, my kid can't relate to this at all. It's their teacher. maybe they don't need to, right? And this, I'm not exactly sure if I feel like he's dismantling like 3 of his previous points right now.
But not because they're your friends and you use DEI as an excuse.
Exactly, I totally agree with you on that. Karita Mayfield, who leads the science department at ARMS, that's the middle school.
This is a great point. If a workforce is 100% Asian, that could be a very diverse workforce. But Doug doesn't realize that because Asian to him is just Chinese. Exactly. You would have a group of people from various countries all over the place, right, including the United States, right, if they're just ethnically Asian, right, genetically Asian, they have Asian traits, but they're second, third generation, The manager right there, yeah. He's like, oh, where are you from? Huh? Where are your parents from? Iowa. Oh, I thought maybe you're Vietnamese. No, we're from Iowa. Yeah, my great granddad was from Vietnam or Cambodia or South Korea or something. And then you've got the rest of the place being fitted out with people from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines, India, Burma, Bhutan. Like, go nuts. It would be very diverse. And lots of different religious systems being employed there too. So this makes no sense. The idea here when he ever talks about this is just like the bell curve kind of stuff where it's like, well, those Asians right there. Yeah, the ones that work in the laundromats and do the, have the restaurants and stuff like that. Or the Vietnamese places with the nail salons. I'm pretty sure that's what he's got pictured in his head, and that's all he can picture in his head.
School that we're talking about here described the push for diversity as more performance than reality, saying, quote, I'm a prop to support the numbers that Doreen is putting forth that I know are BS because there's no distinction between faculty.
BS stands for Barbara Streisand.
And paraprofessionals. Now,
gotta find a new whipping person on this. Does anyone care about conservatives taking pot shots at Barbara Streisand anymore? I mean, that's some deep cut, ditto head, Rush Limbaugh crap right there. Fenton says, I really think Doug's motive in this is appealing to his clients. I've known a lot of those types. They didn't like his anti-theism, so he changed focus. Yeah. Yeah, but Doug doesn't know anything about this. Nothing he says is applicable in any real sense. Is he trolling or really just this confident? I think it's an unhealthy combination of both. Stephanie brings up an interesting point. Tons of studies show that Anglo-sounding names get first look at resumes when the exact same people with not so Anglo-sounding names never get the call. There is a lot of evidence supporting that.
Cunningham has responded to the critique by arguing that people are racist and that they're afraid of black women in leadership roles.
I don't know if Cunningham did directly. I know her son did. Cunningham's son used to work for the school district as well. He's mentioned in the New Yorker article, and he basically said that, like, well, they're afraid of a black woman in a position of authority, so that's why they're doing this. And it's like, that's a completely useless take, man. Like, if he's trying to say, look, she didn't do anything wrong, and the only reason, and this whole thing, they're just trying to hang around her neck and have her just be the scapegoat for the whole thing, then he might have a point there. He might really have a point there. But if any of these, a lot of these allegations were against her and the people that she knew, and if that's the case, then what he's saying is basically just, this irrelevant kind of thing. And here's one of the problems with racism in America is when racism gets used that way.
Was, by the way, placed on leave last May.
People are afraid of black women in leadership roles?
Yes.
Why is that?
People are afraid. Some people are afraid of black women in support roles. I don't know. Is Doug not aware of this?
No one black woman.
You don't. Well, I thought he was married to a black woman, so.
I'm not afraid of her in leadership roles.
And her employment was eventually terminated in October. She has filed a discrimination complaint against the district after they let her go. Now, there was also 2 religious employees that she had hired, right? And those religious employees ended up getting investigated due to their treatment of transgender students. So
if you're queer, you're a sinner and going to hell.
One of those employees was Hector Santos, Latino, and Delinda Dykes, who is black. Again, deeply religious, did not.
It's an unfortunate name given what we're talking.
Well, I mean, I think they would say that they're deeply religious, but they claim that they didn't engage in the stuff that people are accusing them of. And multiple people, adults and students, had accused them of little prayer circles, binding the demons and casting out the trans demons and this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I just don't know how much proof there was. There's a lot of smoke here, but
seem to respect the transgender students. Both were perceived as close with Cunningham. They were seen constantly conversing with Cunningham around the campus. Now, many people allege that both Dykes and Santos brought religion into the school. Dykes told colleagues and students that she would pray for them, or if they were facing some dilemma, ask if they had prayed on it.
Just pray the gay away. Pray that queerness right out of you. If you think you're a boy when you're a girl, we can pray that devil demon right out of you. Hey, if it works, it works.
According to a
so he's okay with this being in public school.
Title IX investigation, Santos brought up the Bible and Jesus when speaking with students. And again, they weren't very friendly to transgender students. A cartoon that Santos had shared on Facebook showed a hand with stigmata protecting two children from a downpour of rainbow-colored paint, along with a text in Spanish that read, "If my 4-year-old son tells me that he wants to dress up as a princess, I will tell him no, because he was born a boy and boys are princes."
Yeah, you're going to solve all this problem by having a dress code in public schools. Say, if you were assigned a boy at birth, you got to wear pants, short hair. And if you're assigned a girl. By the way, if you're a progressive woke person, please know that whenever you use the word assigned at birth, conservatives think bad thoughts about you. But anyhow,
But conservatives think bad thoughts about almost everyone all the time. I was a conservative with a massive chip on my shoulder. There were very few groups that I didn't have some problem with. The idea that, well, be careful, because if you say something, those people will think bad of you. Newsflash. A good conservative, a real conservative, already hates your guts.
you get the point. You could have a dress code in public schools, and maybe that will cut down on the bullying. What is worse?
It doesn't. If it did, I would like for him to explain why bullying is such a problem in a country like Japan, where most students are required to wear uniforms. You know what they'll do? Some schools at some age ranges, they'll have a different uniform. It's sort of like black head to toe, and then other students will have a slightly different one. They'll be younger or something from a slightly different school, and they're very, very similar. But you can tell, they can tell, hey, you're from that school around the way, right? And chuck a rock at them or something. So it happens.
Worse, to be bullied for being queer, for being trans, or to have a dress code you don't like. Is there any trans people in here? If you had a choice between, let's say you think you're a girl and you're a boy, and you really want to wear dresses and makeup, but the dress code says no.
This won't work where he's going. This is not going to work with conservatives. They're going to get upset because what we could just do is like, all right, comrades, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. You will all be assigned to the same uniform, which is basically just a big pair of like workers' overalls, and their heads are shaved, male or female, right? And then you're off to school for the day. It'll look like you're sending them off to the mines, but they're actually going to school. Matching shoes, matching stuff. Only one color, olive drab. That's the only thing they're allowed. Any color, that's a paddling. Glasses that aren't regulation. You better believe that's a paddling. So, yeah, there you go. And then all the conservatives are like, well, they're trying to turn our kids into these communist automatons. Like, well, yeah, but it was just easier than having to deal with the trans stuff that you guys had a problem with. You didn't want them expressing any gender identity or any individuality, so we just decided the easiest thing to do was make them all look as much as possible. They're very similar now. And some of them are heavier than the others and taller and shorter, but whatever.
That hurts you, right? You can't be who you really are. So you're sad. But then you get teased when you do wear dresses and makeup, and so you're sad there too. So which sadness is bigger, I wonder? I would think if the sadness of being bullied by kids and maybe even punched by kids, I would think that sadness would be bigger than the sadness of wearing clothes that you don't want to wear. So maybe you should be for a dress code.
I think my stupid example gave a pretty good idea where that can go. Also, dress codes usually will occasionally run into issues, and I put this in there. They can occasionally run into issues with First Amendment issues because things like writing on shirts is a protected form of First Amendment speech. So it's a little tough to try to do. Now, if you go to a private school and you're abiding by those particular rules, and part of that, like if you want to attend here, you have to wear the uniform. This is how you're gonna, you're gonna no piercings, no tattoos, blah blah blah. Fine. But as far as a public school goes, the extent to which they can enforce that kind of stuff is limited because they are an expression of the government at the state and federal level in most cases.
So
okay, so here we go. The clash begins.
It begins, yes.
Now, if you're a rational person, as we like to think we are, you're going to say, but who was right and who was wrong, right? So I don't care that the employees were black or Latino and
See, this is one thing a lot of people don't get. They think that there is, on every issue, a right and wrong. They don't realize that people are different and value things differently. They have different moral standards. It's either
No, that's not a problem here. The problem here is that, yeah, some of these advisors do obviously value things different. They don't value LGBTQ people, and they think because they're Christian, they can bring that into the workplace and kind of play around with that. And their particular job working for a public school system in any state is going to have an issue with that. So they need to keep that stuff stum. They need to button that up or find it the different way to earn a living. That's it. That's the right and wrong of this whole thing. If you want to continue to live your life as a bigoted moron Christian, in this case, the fundamentalist, national conservative Christian, the political identity as well as the really badly informed theology, go right ahead and do that. But you don't get to just wheel it in on a wagon into your place of business, which happens to be working for the state or the federal government. Because it is a pluralistic society. And guess who's liable for your actions? The effing government is.
appealing to God, for example, that's their standard of right and wrong, or if they're appealing to unnecessary suffering and well-being, that's a different standard, or they're just appealing to their moral intuitions, a different standard. People have to get through their thick skulls that the facts of the matter can be known 100% by two different people, and they can have completely different conclusions to those facts.
Right. And in this case, if somebody's trying to conclude like, well, there's nothing wrong with these people coming in here with their Christian culture stuff, there absolutely is according to the standards that we set for these public school teachers. If they want to take that stuff into a school, work for a school, they need to go to Christian schools to do that. Then they'd be fine. They can't be rocking that stuff while they're working for a public school, state, or, with state and federal funding going on. That's the limit. That's the law. I don't know what's hard about that. It's kind of interesting because Captain Cut and Dry here is really trying to nuance the shit out of this, and he's getting it completely wrong.
So many times I hear these progressive woke people, but if you just follow the science and follow the data, then you would think exactly the way I think.
If you just follow the law.
That's rubbish.
In terms of convincing people, yeah, you might have a point there. In terms of like actually administering an education system, it's not. It really isn't. The reason that you've got those private schools is so people can go and do that kind of stuff. I want my kid handling rattlesnakes as soon as possible. I really need my kid to identify that way. Okay, you can send him to a school that does that kind of thing. But this is the Tennessee state school system. We can't hire people that do that here. What kind of system are you talking about? Don't you know there's more than just a right and a wrong answer to certain things? Yeah. Okay, sometimes. Take them to a religious school.
For trans, I care, who's right? Tell me the facts. But for the extreme left, this becomes a problem because they're like, well, we're in favor of blacks and Latinos, but we're also in favor of trans people. What do? We're stuck. You're not stuck. Just see who's right. So in this case,
see who's right. If parents don't want their kids around queer trans people,
then they can save up and send those kids to a bigoted conservative religious school. If they want the benefit of sending their kid to a public school, they're going to have to deal with that because there's going to be other people there that come from backgrounds that they don't understand, maybe they don't like, but they're going to have to deal with it.
and they start removing their kids from that school will die.
No. What the hell is he even talking about here?
Who's right? Who's wrong? Like what I'm getting at, there's practical implications.
What is the practical the practical implication is not what he thinks it is here. There is middle school kids are morons and often easily led by the nose. If there's a culture going on in a school where the kids are bullying LGBTQ kids, that's probably flowing downhill from some adults. And the kids like at that age, and they tend to take signaling pretty well. So oftentimes this kind of prejudice isn't as bad in high school. At least it's not as bad as it used to be. But in middle school, it is incredibly bad. The state of Michigan had an issue with this during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, right after Donald Trump got in, there was a Southern Poverty Law report done that schools, I think is it Paw Paw or Portage, Michigan, which is kind of in the southwest of the state, we're having real issues with K through 8 kids, so elementary through middle school, getting into little gangs and stuff and chanting racist, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ things at their fellow students, and sometimes at certain teachers. So there's a real problem with this kind of thing over there, and there was a whole write-up on it. Like it was weird. So, yeah, the idea that that's there, I mean, kids are going to kind of follow some examples there, and if they're allowed to kind of get away with stuff like this, he even talks about this. You let some of these kids get away with that. Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like the administrators at this particular school were a little sympathetic to what these bullies were doing. Maybe that was the problem.
That oftentimes it's not a matter of who's right and who's wrong.
Well, in this case, those kids were wrong, and the administrators were wrong for not trying to do something about it. That sounds pretty cut and dry to me.
It's a matter of what's going to work and what doesn't work.
Right, and you know what generally works? Laying down the law for a bunch of asshole kids treating other people like crap. If the parents have a problem with that, you tell the parents, look, if you want to raise a bunch of bigots, you can send them to the bigot school across the way. God bless and good luck. Your kid's a moron, by the way. He's not passing their tests, so good luck.
It's complicated because you can't, if you're a liberal, you can't say, I want blacks and Latinos to be represented, but I don't want their culture. Because remember,
you absolutely do not have to make this distinction. I don't even understand what Cenk is trying to do here. You don't have to worry about this. Having blacks and Latinos represented in the workforce is one thing. Saying that, I can't say anything about the fact that they keep dragging religion into the place of work, and we both work at the state level, or we work for the government in some capacity, and they're not supposed to be doing that. That has nothing to do with their representation in the workforce. That is about them violating probably state and federal laws combined. And that's pretty cut and dry. You can just kind of take that one and be rest assured, like, yeah, they're not supposed to effing do that. And no amount of DEI is going to clear that shit up. They're like, well, I'm sorry you have a problem with my Christianity, but as a Latino or a black person, you're not allowed to have a problem with the fact that I'm at this public school to tell your kids about Jesus. I absolutely can have a problem with that. Do you know why? Because it's against the law.
remember, blacks and Latinos generally are a little bit more religious than the average bear.
You just realized he just admitted a lot of people on the left are just full out racist? Listen to this.
I want blacks and Latinos to be represented, but I don't want their culture.
Yeah. He's separating skin color from culture and talking about people on the left saying, I want blacks and Latinos represented, but I don't want their culture. He's saying, I want their race. People on the left are the most racist people in the United States.
Prove it. Prove that. You can't. You cannot prove that. Not to say that that's not a thing. There are racist people who are left, but they're not racist in the way that old Doug is talking about here. There are some out-and-out racist leftists because they completely separate the political economic ideology of leftism. They don't want private property. And they also are complete bigots when it comes to certain people being allowed to live in their country. It exists. There's just about every kind of mixed flavor for political and social ideologies. That does happen. I don't think he'd recognize one. I think if he talked to one, he would be unpleasantly surprised and, frankly, woefully unprepared to deal with all the directions that that conversation would take.
because they're in this guise of Feelsorryforism, and they would just want to help.
Not the racist leftists. They don't feel sorry for anybody. They don't even feel sorry for business people. They want them gone.
And they're just pure motives and love.
They do not. This is just the tree-hugging liberal. This is not the lefty. There are tree-hugging liberals, the tree-hugging hippie type, that are leftists. That's true. But they are not mutually inclusive identities. This is absolutely absurd that he keeps rolling out this tired, moldy stereotype like he's just, he's got this all figured out, kids.
Because remember, blacks and Latinos generally are a little bit more religious than the average bear, okay? And the average person in the country. So you're going to get a part of their culture when you hire them.
Not in a public school where they're not supposed to be bringing that shit with them to work. It doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with it. Their representation in the workforce is not what you're not looking like, oh, well, if we bring these people in, we need to discriminate against them because of their religion. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. Jesus, Cenk, what the fuck?
So
okay, but no.
And the stupidness of this, the stupidity of this.
Right, but the stupidity here is on display. It does not seem to me like most of the stuff that's happening in this particular school district is that the school district didn't know how to administer the complaints of bullying against LGBTQ students. And now that it's blown up, they don't know how to administer actually taking care of the problem in a way that's going to please everybody because it's gotten so bad, everyone is pissed at them. They can literally at this point please no one. If they resign, if they fire each other, if they all just collectively leave one day and the building is just empty, it's not going to matter. One of these groups is still going to remain ticked off about this entire thing because they pooched this thing so badly. Like this does not to me indicate in any way that this is some kind of like, well, this is just an example of what's happening in these liberal enclaves like Amherst. I mean, they'll eat each other now, folks. Like, no, that's just trying to signal to conservatives like, well, they just can't keep it together over there. Like, this is kind of a unique situation. Well, I don't think it's that unique for these schools to kind of be at each other's throats, but it is kind of unique in that it's gotten this bad.
Is that you can have black people with dark skin of various cultures. You can have Hispanics of various cultures. There is no one black culture. There is no one Hispanic culture.
Agreed. So when he and Cenk are trying to say, well, they don't want the culture here. Well, their culture isn't uniformly Christian. So it doesn't matter. If we're hiring a qualified person and they happen to be black or Latino or whatever, when they come in, part of the qualifications are, do you know how to represent yourself? Do you know how to keep your religious views to yourself if you're going to be working at a public school? That's part of your qualifications. If you turn out to be an employee that doesn't know how to do that, you're gone. And it doesn't matter what your skin color is. You're gone. Or you're going to end up getting the counseling to be like, look, we already talked about this. Knock it off. And if they don't, then they're gone. At my old job, a lot of meetings had to be held because someone couldn't keep their religion to themselves. A lot of people got fired because they didn't take the hint after the first conflict meeting. Yeah. But keep in mind, Nicola lives up in the great big, frozen social experiment that is Canada. So, as far as conservatives and like Doug are concerned, well, he had to flee there as a Mennonite because of the oppression and such. There are tree-hugging liberals, and then there's the left. And the left wants to scalp the people who ruined the world. Right. I really don't think that Nicola has nailed it perfectly. I don't think that Doug has ever talked to a leftist. Well, that's not true. He's talked to me, so he's talked to him. And I was very cordial and sympathetic with him. But we didn't get into we didn't get into like what I would do to, say, corporate business laws in the country, which would probably make his nose bleed if he heard me talking about it. But we end up talking about the social stuff, and that's all he ever talks about. That's the stuff that everybody kind of gets triggered on. That's the thing that fires up the dopamine. And so he thinks that left stuff is all the culture stuff. And it's not.
You can have white people who are very different. It's true.
Look, listen.
Okay.
So you can have a ton of diversity with a bunch of white people. Do you know that? You could have a school run by 100% white people and have a ton of diversity.
Yes, you can if you're getting them from hopefully not from religious backgrounds, but it does reflect it. I mean, if they're there. But you're also going to get a lot of diversity if you're hiring people from different parts of the country, or you're hiring them from different countries. You got an actual French teacher from France. You got a Spanish teacher from Spain, and they're white. Maybe the Spaniard is a little darker, you know. Sorry, that just came out completely ignorant sounding. But I'm sure some conservative is going to point out, wait a minute, Spaniards. I mean, that would be, you know, plenty diverse in terms of some kind of, you know, ethnic identity, national identity that's different than just, you know, your home state. Are any leftists and any tree-hugging liberals denying that that's what diversity is? I mean, conservatives are the ones that tried to say that diversity initiatives by the tree-hugging libbies was this idea about putting in race quotas and skin color quotas into all of these agencies and stuff. I don't know if he understands this, but part of Harvard's diversity initiative for, and I know he doesn't have any respect for Harvard because he knew that William F. Buckley didn't either. But William F. Buckley was a sleazy Yaley anyway, I think. Harvard actually had a disproportionate number of students from South Dakota. And it was part of a diversity initiative to get more people from the central states in the country, and a lot of them were homeschooled. So they had this kind of unusually high percentage of South Dakota students who had homeschooled for at least part of their school career, sometime between K and 12. As part of a diversity initiative. They weren't just pulling in kids from, you know, wealthy families in New England. So yes, people who have thought about this understand that diversity is more than skin color quotas. Skin color quotas are a boogeyman created by conservatives to make these programs look like they're reverse racism. They never were. These guys just didn't want to do anything to change any of their, you know, opinions, and they wanted to turn something in, you know, something ostensibly okay into something truly horrible.
Oh, you want diversity of color, of skin color.
No, boogeyman.
Oh, you racist, you.
Already debunked. Look up the South Dakota kids. Sorry.
I'm only saying half the statement.
I respect their religious views, right? But when you're talking about a public school, your religious views have to stay at home. Okay, you're not allowed to promote your religion or force your religion upon the students.
I'm glad he finally acknowledges that, and I'm glad that they're bringing that up. If you're at a public school, it's run by the government, you don't get to do that. Doug has talked to several leftists. I've even talked to him on a Discord server.
Within that campus, you're just
Separation of church and state.
not allowed to do that.
Yeah, so I was going to get to the but, right? So on the one hand, you can't be horrified by their religious beliefs, etc. You don't get to say
Some of them you can be horrified by.
You can be horrified at the application at work.
hey, I want to hire you, but I want you to act white, okay? On the other hand, if you're in that community, I respect your religion, but you don't get to bring it into the school. That's not how.
He just completely biffed that point. That was awful.
So
Holy crap.
What does acting white mean?
It works, that's unconstitutional, and it's
Because
You wear a big brown belt and wash your car once a week.
I mean, there's a lot of hippies with man buns who are white, who are.
I don't know. That was the best thing I could do. You also don't use washcloths, right? Like white people don't use washcloths. I have no idea where that came from, but that's like a stereotype, I guess.
Are very different than me, but they're white. I'm white, apparently, although I identify as black. So what does acting white mean?
It's not fair to the students that aren't Christian. And in this case, it's super unfair to the trans students who don't need you talking about stigmata and all that nonsense. So you don't get to say, hey, I'm black or Latino, and hence I'm going to bring the religion into the school. No, but
You're
a lot
not
of
allowed
times.
to do that. It's
Okay, yeah. So Cenk now kind of making part of the point that I was making before.
that
Yeah,
simple.
but a lot of times white liberals have trouble because they're generally, sometimes they're patronizing. And
Sometimes?
so they're like, ooh, what do we say to them? Just talk honestly.
Yeah, okay. This is where they really go off the mark here, because now they're trying to say, well, this is where these white liberals are having a problem. I didn't get the impression that this was an issue in terms of them not being able to figure out what they will or won't do it so much as what they can and can't do given their roles in the administration, who can get fired, who gets disciplined, how do they document this. I mean, these people really pooch their jobs hard. And there's a lot of blame to go around, and when that happens, people start looking for the door and they're looking to cover their asses. So it gets confusing. The idea that this is like a lot of liberal hand-wringing, like, well, I don't want to offend this particular underrepresented group at the expense of the other one. I did not get the impression that that was an issue at all from the student paper that was written, the student article that was written. I did get that the Jessica Winter article from the New Yorker was trying to put some of that in there. And I still didn't exactly see it. I don't understand why it was really this. To me, it just seems like they're kind of paralyzed from a total corporate mentality.
See with that.
White liberals have trouble because for the most part, they tend to be pretty privileged, okay, pretty well-to-do, okay, and are hyper-focused on the culture war stuff, which is typically driven by their unending guilt.
Oh.
This is also a stereotype that I don't understand.
That's exactly it. I always forget her name. Ana.
It's Ana Kasparian.
Kasparian? Yeah. I mean, is she going to be conservative by election time?
I would argue that some of her points are very conservative now. If he means that is she going to vote for Trump? No, because Trump ain't a conservative.
Is she going to vote for Trump? Is the young Turk
No, Trump's not a conservative, Doug.
co-anchor going to be a Trump voter? My goodness.
No. The only person I know that swapped over to that is maybe Michael Rappaport, and he sounds like a lunatic right now.
But she nailed it. I call it Feelsorryforism. But maybe guilt is a better word to use.
Okay.
I was just so lucky. I made a ton of choices in my life, and more of them have been good than bad. But really, it's because, I mean, we can't blame people for making bad choices. I mean, that would make them feel bad, and we can't shame them.
This kind of shameless stereotyping of all liberals and leftists is really, I mean, it's really offensive to me because, like I said, I came up as a working class, middle class kid with kind of a big chip, and it was conservative, raised in a conservative church and home, homeschooled K through 12, taught young earth creationism and the whole bit, you know, and it took a lot to kind of shrug some of that stuff off or amend things and kind of, you know, get over some of those insecurities and blind spots and, frankly, a lot of weaknesses because my education was horrible. But that being said, you know, I did have parents that encouraged intellectual curiosity, and I was a reader. So in that sense, my education was pretty good. I just didn't have the resources that I think a lot of kids growing up at the same time as me took for granted. Like, you know, teachers that gave a shit and, you know, knew more things than the kids did. This kind of stuff here where he's just trying to like, oh, it's just these wealthy types that are just trying to like, you know, give back or whatever. I'm sure cringy people like this exist out there, no doubt. But that is a stereotype of a leftist. That's just a stereotype, Doug.
That would make them feel bad. So maybe if we feel sorry for them, we can pull them up and know that we're on their side.
Yeah, kind of Titan.
Be a freaking human being. Treat the freaking...
Okay, now she's getting pretty ranty now. Why do they conflate left with neo-lib? I know people in the groups that I didn't really run with a group, but you would conflate it because it was a way to make any leftists look bad. But I didn't really understand the distinction myself until I was 28 and realized that I actually agreed with left-wing political ideology a lot more than I agreed with the kind of classic conservative stuff. The liberal stuff, the laissez-faire capitalism, deregulated businesses, private ownership of all that stuff. And that's the liberal view. Didn't care for that at all. Didn't realize I didn't.
Students with respect, okay? And can we please just hire the most qualified people to do the job? Because kids can't...
Yes! Oh.
Yeah, that wasn't the problem either, right? I mean, the problem was that they hired an HR person that maybe was hiring unqualified people, so they're going to have to take steps. But this can happen in any organization. I didn't get the impression that this was happening because of DEI initiatives. The biggest issue wasn't that this Denise Cunningham lady was just was only hiring like minorities. It was she was only hiring close personal friends who seemed to attend the same churches. That's a big issue. That's a big problem. Nicholas says, yes, he thinks diversity is just about which 4 racial groups you fall into and doesn't acknowledge that culture matters or that there's more racial and ethnic groups.
It's like I'm looking in the mirror here, except she's way prettier than me. But I tell you, you put me in a red dress and some makeup and a wig with long hair, I could pass for a girl, a woman, maybe. You gotta get close shave.
Even freaking read.
Yeah, so my question to Ana Kasparian is, if we hired the best, most qualified people and they turned out to be 100% Asian or 100% white, would you be okay with that?
This is irrelevant. Like, because you could, what about this issue? Gray Knight said, that's not a DEI issue, that's a nepotism issue. So, okay, would Doug have an issue if somebody in a public school got hired in and only brought in their relatives? Their relatives happen to be the most qualified people for the job, but now you have a real problem with an appearance of nepotism. What do you do?
If we hired the only most qualified and best airline pilots, and they happen to be 100% white males between the ages of 40 and 60, would you?
Now I know this is proof that he's been watching Fox News or OWN or Newsmax, because they were making a big deal about this, 2 weeks ago? Talking about DEI initiatives. This is the reason these planes are having problems, is because they're hiring these diversity candidates. Like, really, it's not Boeing just, cutting corners on all their planes?
Would you be okay with that? With the hairy arms like I got? Seems like she's poo-pooing diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We're having a discussion about is the double-blind hiring process increasing diversity when the person who's implementing this policy isn't even following it and deciding to hire her friends instead?
She's clearly bad at her job. Anna Kate did claim she wouldn't vote for Biden over Gaza, but I don't know if she'll actually vote for Trump. Yeah, Trump would be even worse for Gaza, I think.
Yeah,
100%. Ridiculous.
If you didn't have the needless white guilt, if you didn't have the patronizing
unbearable.
attitude, you would just simply say.
Okay, this is a public service announcement to all the white people listening.
Right, but I'm trying to figure out where this is coming from, because they're reacting to nothing here. They're reacting to what they think is the issue going on there, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the people that are there either are not allowed to talk about this in any real way because their jobs are on the line or their next job is on the line, so they need to stay quiet and not comment on pending disciplinary actions and things like this. And because in that silence of people covering their asses or looking for the door or a combination of the two, they're trying to say, well, the problem here is these people just aren't willing to take a stand because they're riddled with liberal guilt. Like, they want to be able to get hired in another school job for the next school year. Right, and they're doing whatever the uppers want them to do, which is not to keep talking about these conservative issues or these controversial issues. Wait for it to happen. Wait, see if it becomes a court issue, and go from there.
Stop feeling guilty for making right choices in your life that led to your financial success or any other success. Stop feeling guilty.
Who would feel guilty about that?
Maybe once in a while, look at another person and say, I am better than you in this area of life. Learn from me.
What would they learn?
Someone on the left could never, ever do something like that because it makes people feel.
Sure they could. Why wouldn't they? But what would you be learning from the other? Like, what would you be applying to the other person's life? Like, one-to-one? I don't know how many people's lives line up that way, where you could just take one element of your success at a particular thing and say, well, in this issue, all you got to do is do exactly what I do, and you'll be just as successful in the same way. What kind of childish worldview is that?
Feel bad and hurts their feelings. I made a short saying I'm a better immigrant than the illegal immigrants.
Not when you vote for Trump, you won't be, because then you'll be voting for people like yourself to get thrown out.
I obey the law.
Although I guess Trump doesn't mind people coming from. Is Canada a crap country or a good country? I can't tell.
I paid the fees. I did the time. I even had to show my bank accounts to cross into the United States a couple times, show that I wouldn't be a burden on society. I pay my taxes. Probably paid more taxes than most people make in a year in their gross income.
Co-parter. What a crotchety old man. I pay my taxes. I paid my way. That's not really how citizenship works. And Doug learned that when he was watching those videos about the immigrants that show up here. They get a court date for a case, and they're 6, 7, 8 years waiting for their court date to happen, and they're working here. They pay taxes, and they get no representation and no benefits. Now, some of Doug's friends and people that they'll tell him that, oh no, they get on the dole. They get all sorts of bennies. They don't. They get some if they first get here, if they truly are in like kind of a refugee situation. Once they start having to work their ass off, they can't vote. So,
I've never committed a crime. I've been vaccinated twice. Once in Canada for all the things, and then again in the United States because I lost a lot of my records.
okay.
I'm a productive member of society.
I thought he disagreed with the COVID vax, though. So why is he using that as a token of a...
I am better than illegal immigrants. So we got to teach these guilty white liberals on how to look someone in the eye and say that they're better than another person in this specific area. So practice, liberals. So imagine you encounter someone who committed a crime.
I thought you already said they were conceited. Why would you want liberals to practice being more conceited with people?
A bad crime.
I mean, the condescension that they're employing, right, is usually what people, that's usually what conservatives, like, they don't really mean that kind of stuff. They're actually secretly conceited. They feel like that because they're trying to, like, feel better about themselves or virtue signal to their friends. The condescension is part of them being conceited. Them practicing, like, oh, I don't feel guilty about this at all. Yeah, they're trying to signal that they don't really feel guilty, right? That was supposed to be the original point of the whole virtue signaling thing. Apparently, they've lost the plot on this, too. You guys can't even signal right. Holy shit.
Let's say rape.
You got to get your game plan lined up.
And they happen to be black. You look at that black person and say, I'm better than you in this area because I've never raped anybody. Just to practice.
Because I've never... What?
It's like, that's an easy one.
What the hell did he just say? Hang on, I just lost it.
I mean, there's even if it's opposite of what you think, respect them, but also respect yourself and be honest with them and say, hey, every time I call you a he, I might say she because you really look like a she, Asian or 100% white. Would you be okay with that? If we hired, and then again in the United States, because I lost a lot of my records, and they happen to be black. You look that black person in the eye and say, I'm better than you in this area because I've never raped anybody. Just to practice. Like, that's an easy one.
I really can't say enough why you should not ever do that. Don't ever do that to anyone regardless of their color or national background. Holy fucking shit, dog. Just get the swastika tattooed now, you fucking dork.
No, you can't tell a trans student that God is looking out for that person, and if they listen to God enough, they'll turn around.
Yeah, he's Tim Pool aging quickly. Yeah,
and be straight. That's not close. Of course, you can't say that in a public school.
EE says I've never committed a crime. I mean, impossible. Yeah, you're right. I got one speeding ticket in the last 10 years, but it was a bad cop. True story. I was coming back from Phoenix to Tucson, and the guy, my son's in the front seat with me. I'm going. The speed limit is 65. I'm going 69. I always go about 4 over. Get pulled over. Cop says I'm doing 90. Flat out lie. There's no way I was doing 90. Traffic. And I wasn't. I was in one. Thing is, I had to go to contest it. I would have to go into Phoenix. It would be an hour. So I'm not gonna. It was cheaper just to pay the fine.
That's how they get you, dog. That's how they get you.
And I even recorded after the police gave me the ticket. The car was running the whole time. I just showed the judge this.
Kept misgendering the transgender students and then blamed it on, English being a second language. Okay, it might be some language barrier stuff.
By the way,
you were hired as a counselor at a middle school where you're supposed to counsel students in English.
Whoa, we got a left-wing woke liberal. Well, I don't think she's woke anymore, but is she actually demanding that counselors speak English?
To not make excuses about misgendering people because they speak another language is the point she was trying to make.
Don't you realize there are oppressed minorities who do not understand English? Man, there's hope for America.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
And I hear you. Look, but if he just screwed up a couple of times and said the wrong gender, there's no new giant magazine article about it. We're not talking about it here. It wasn't just that he misgendered a couple of times.
They faced a
They're
Title
constantly bringing
IX
religion in.
investigation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they're constantly misgendering. By the way, here's my advice to people out.
Doug's going to blow out the number of Title IX complaints filed against that school district
There when it comes to
He's just not even going to deal with it.
pronouns. Respect people's pronouns. If they want to be called something, even if it's opposite of what you think, respect them. But also respect yourself and be honest with them and say, hey, every time I call you a he, I might say she because you really look like a she to me. So when I say he and you want to be called she, please know that it's difficult because I view you as a she. And so it's always going to be the opposite of what you want. See, but I think this would tick off trans people because not only do they want the right pronoun, their preferred pronoun enunciated to them, but they want you to mean it and believe it in your heart. Am I wrong?
Yes.
Because I've been told just saying that is a dick move.
Yeah, it is, because you're assuming that you know that their motivations are. The only thing that they're looking for is just common courtesy. What they're hoping that you're not going to do, if you're doing that kind of thing where you're kind of screwing it up, if you do that often enough, frequently enough, you can apologize as much as you want, but the fact that it's not sinking in is a sign that you're being an inconsiderate dick. So they don't care that you agree or that it's going to be tough. They're asking for just common consideration. That's it. It's just a polite thing to do. He kind of already acknowledged that, and then he's trying to say like, I can do that, but I'm also keeping in the back of my head that they're a bunch of strange people that need me to believe this, and secretly they're looking to trap me with their rhetorical pronoun games. That doesn't sound like you're honestly engaging with them. So why would you even bother? Why not just do the dick thing? I don't understand what he's doing with this.
Why is it a dick move to be honest?
Because you're not being honest. You're being an inconsiderate dickhead. It's not about honesty.
And warn them. If I do misgender you, it's because you.
If you do that, and if you have trouble figuring that out, most people that I know who are trans will deal with that. I've made that slip before because there's people that I've known before they transition and after they transition, and I was used to having conversations with them before. The old pronoun came out. That happened. They didn't come to my house and try to kidnap me in the middle of the night and try to indoctrinate me or anything. I mean, I apologized for it if it sounded inconsiderate. And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, frankly, I felt kind of weird that that it didn't occur to me. Like it happened and I didn't even realize it. But I didn't feel super guilty about it. I mean, I was apologetic if it made her feel bad. Actually, that situation, I made him feel bad. But I'm sure it's happened more than a couple of times.
Look like a man. I mean, you look like a man to me, but you want me to call you she?
This is not the issue that they're having. This is him making excuses for it. I'm probably just going to, not only am I going to mess this up once or twice, I'm going to mess it up a lot and frequently. That does make it sound like you're not really paying attention to what they deal with. And then when you come around and say the quiet part out loud, I think that you want me to believe it, and I think you seriously hold it against me if I get it wrong, right? So I'm not really all that serious about it. I just know that you're trying to trap me. Okay. So tell me again why you're trying to be as considerate as possible when that's what you think. Don't be a dick, Doug.
Just warning you, you're a man in my brain, but I will say she to you with my mouth. And that's a conflict. That's cognitive dissonance. So I'm just warning you, I might screw up.
It's not. That isn't cognitive dissonance. That's just an inflexible brain struggling to cope.
My advice is for everyone is to say that.
Don't take Doug's advice.
To a trans person. And see how they react.
Yeah, just show them this clip and tell them this is who I get my advice from, and then they'll run away from you screaming.
My guess is they want you
And just be like, yeah, I'm going to lose your phone number.
to believe it in your heart of hearts and share in their identity that they share in.
Title IX investigation was damning. The results were damning. We're gonna get to that in just a second. I'm gonna give you a specific example of one of the transgender students, pseudonym here, not a real name, but Joe, goes by Joe in the piece. So Joe was allegedly relentlessly bullied by some of the students at this middle school. But there was a problem because the students went unpunished for the bullying that was taking place.
Unpunished?
Joe and their mother continued to report incidents of alleged bullying and harassment to various staffers at Arms. Although one boy received a suspension, Joe and their mother were dismayed that the school did not mete out more consequences.
Oh, this is a fancy word for people in Idaho. The school did not mete out. That means basically, mete out, to give out more consequences. See, this is education here. This is educational live stream for people in Idaho.
Now, why? Why did they not mete out more consequences? This is where I rip my hair out of my head. Like many other progressive school districts, Amherst uses restorative justice practices, which prioritize let's mediation and
You guys see what's happening here? There's a lot of schools in the United States, a lot of them in liberal progressive districts, who feel so sorry for minorities that when these kids do something bad in school, they can't expel them, they can't suspend them. They do restorative justice practices. They sit down with them and talk with them and say, it's not your fault.
What a bunch of idiots, right? I mean, they're trying to educate these kids and they're deigned to speak with them. Get losers.
Oh, I don't know what they say, but I'm imagining they say, it's not your fault. I mean, it's just because, systemic racism, but we got to help you talk it through. And now...
Yeah, that kind of spelling of meet out is a very different kind of live stream. Nicholas says, also fun how, like all transphobes and homophobes, PineCreek is exclusively focused on the penile endowed. Not concerned with trans men. Nope. Rarely brings it up.
It's used against... Now the problem is, these parents of trans kids are mad because, why aren't you expelling these bullies? Why aren't you suspending these bullies? Well, we're sitting down and we're talking with them. People on the left love to talk.
Except that the remediation, the restorative justice practices, which are being done here, what's kind of, if you read between the lines, if it's coming from these particular counselors and people like Cunningham and others who are all kind of in that same group, they weren't really doing anything with these all that much other than just like, okay, well, you guys hurt each other's feelings. Are you okay now? Go away. That seems to be the thing. And why would they do that? Because they don't care about that kind of bullying. Right? That's, eventually these kids are going to grow up to be, young men, and they're going to need to remember that bigotry to be, for the onward Christian soldier part of their life or something. Who knows?
People on the right, they tend to do. People on the right tend to talk. People on the right tend to do. People on the left tend to talk. Yeah, that's how it goes.
Reconciliation.
People on the left love the word comprehensive. Comprehensive legislation. That's code word for bloviating legislation.
Conservatives use it too. Comprehensive legislation usually means they're going to take rights away and cut taxes for the wealthy. If you do that at the same time, that's comprehensive legislation. Restorative justice practices are a really good thing. Making it up to people when you did wrong is, in fact, a basic human principle of decency. Yeah. And I think that particular system can work pretty well, but in some cases, if you got like repeat offenders, maybe it is time to offer something a little bit more than just, hey, do you feel like, because some of the kids started feeling kind of threatened because they kept getting stuck in these mediation and reconciliation processes where they have to sit across from the kid that keeps threatening to huck rocks at them or something like that, or screams obscenities at them when they're walking down the hall.
Over punishment, meaning nothing. Meaning no action, okay? Don't feed me this BS about like, oh, we did mediation. No, they're relentlessly bullying the transgender student. Okay, you could take your mediation and shove it up your ass because this kid feels unsafe on campus because you guys want to do your...
Ana Kasparian is a conservative. Take this
for trans kids.
Mediation and shove it up your ass. I'm a good boy, so I don't say it loudly, that swear word. I mean, a conservative on the Young Turks. Who would have thunk it?
Little restorative justice. That's what's happening on this campus.
Yeah, and so guys, again, if it was just one case and a kid says, hey, I feel uncomfortable, it's less clear. Based on the circumstance, I would have believed that kid, but still you could say, hey, I'm not sure. But it is not one case. It is several trans students who have experienced the same thing. As Ana said, there was an investigation and it makes the story a little bit clearer. But here we have this feelings of sensitivity.
Even Cenk here sounds reasonable. Like this is...
Well, here, yeah, he was less so on a couple other daffy points he tried to make. Love your avian guest host, Jefferson. Yeah, the birds, they're getting kind of noisy.
Upside down world.
Of the trans community, which can be quite sensitive at times, right? But
What? Did Cenk Unger just criticize
Is Doug not aware that this was going on? This has been going on with the TYT crew for a while.
the trans community? I didn't think that was possible.
trans community, which can be quite sensitive at times, right?
Oh, quite sensitive at times. That's an understatement. The trans community can be quite sensitive at times. Yes, I agree.
Right? But in this case, appear to be incredibly.
I think most trans people have remarkably thick skins. It's very difficult to expect that kind of thick skinness in middle school kids, though, when they're trying to figure this stuff out.
Legitimate, right? Versus restorative justice. So what's a leftist to do?
You have diversity.
What's a left?
I keep finding this, like, this is funnier and funnier to me that they're just assuming that a lot of these administrators, these counselors that have been accused of this are leftists. Like, this is the problem that they were having. I don't think that was really the issue going on here.
do? We're stuck. We want to just talk to these poor bullies because it's not their fault. They're an oppressed minority. But then we've got these other oppressed minorities called trans people. What's a left person to do?
Doug is so happy that this has been completely blown out of proportion in a way that only he can appreciate. And other, kind of like conservative chuds that get off on this kind of stuff. And really, if he read both the articles, who am I kidding? He's not going to read.
Become conservative.
Who
He
are
already
deeply
was.
religious and anti-trans versus transgender students who feel unsafe versus, honestly, the majority of the bullies are described as Black and Latino. So then you have the Black and Latino students who are being protected by the counselors and by the school.
So let me get this straight. We got two progressives here criticizing the trans community for being a little sensitive at times and criticizing oppressed minority Black kids and Hispanic kids for being bullies. Whoa.
I don't think that's the issue that they were taking. The issue is that you've got staff kind of protecting the bullies at the expense of the trans kids, right? That seems to be. But Anna is veering into dumb land.
They
here
understand
quickly.
it's not their fault. That they're oppressed minorities subject to systemic racism who don't have the privilege we do. Me and Anna, two white people. Are we actually holding people responsible for their actions here? What's going on?
Because they really want to implement restorative justice. And guess what? No one's happy. And this is not an environment that's conducive to learning, which is what the school is
I'm happy that Doug is gleeful about all the kids that had to suffer in order for this story to come out.
supposed to be about.
Yeah, and
Pull all those kids, pull those bullies out, pull the trans kids out of those public schools and put.
There was a point in the stream where I said, he basically says this. She says something about just because they're disadvantaged. I'll maybe coming up here pretty quick. I'll play a couple minutes. I'm going
them in private Asian schools. Problem solved. Problem solved. Those Asians will discipline. Love the Asians.
Not if it's a public school, Doug. They're going to do what the public school system has got set up for them.
Love the Jews.
look,
Love the blacks. I love everybody. Power of love, remember?
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but near the end of the story, then the parents get so upset, the white parents, that they start going seemingly after all the minority teachers and staff, and they get to a black teacher and staffer who didn't do anything wrong, and then they start thinking,
What? We got white liberals going after black teachers who didn't do anything wrong? More examples of racism.
about doing an investigation of her. Stop using people's identities as a way of judging them.
I don't think that was what happened in the article either. I'm pretty sure. I mean, look, they had a 6-hour meeting. It's detailed. It's like a loony convention. Those 6-hour board meeting things. Oh, I froze that at the wrong time. I think I can see some of his old fillings. And during this thing, they're calling for like the resignation of people. They want them fired. That's not realistic. That's not going to happen. So yeah, tempers were high.
I gotta clip that and make it short. Stop using people's identities as a way to judge them.
Well, you probably ought to try and take that to heart, Doug.
Bye-bye trans identity, bye-bye black identity, bye-bye Hispanic identity, bye-bye white privilege identity.
That's the lesson he took from that. Fascinating work.
Judge them by the content of their character.
In which case, where is Doug going to, how's he going to rate?
I don't care if they're black or Latino or trans. I can't.
Didn't he earlier say he wanted Hispanics and blacks in these teaching roles earlier? I think he did. Now he's saying he doesn't care about them, their identity.
If they're right or wrong. Okay, that black staffer happened to be a wonderful person who was.
But remember, Cenk is this liberal that's just concerned with what there has to be a right and a wrong. And Doug was like, well, that's not necessarily the case. It's more nuanced than that. But now Cenk's like, look, you just evaluate the student whose behavior was wrong and punish them appropriately. And Cenk's like, I can't believe how conservative they are. Right? Did anybody else catch that? That little contradiction there? Like, Doug might be the worst conservative I've ever heard.
He's trying to bring everybody together, right?
It's
driving me
the other
crazy.
thing that makes this story.
Yes, I agree. Progressive wokeness drives people crazy.
Does Doug think that acknowledging that other cultures exist is the same thing as judging other people based exclusively on their identities? It sure sounded like that's what he was trying to do, right?
Welcome to the right, Cenk and Ana. The water's warm.
Yeah, it's very contradictory, so watch your backs. This is trash, yo. God damn. It is.
You'll start to think more clearly.
Like, this whole situation just drip with like
Yes.
white guilt for privileged white people is the fact that, like, I can't stand this talking point. It drives me crazy. They're so detached from people who are economically disadvantaged that they just assume that economically disadvantaged people act like animals, and that economically disadvantaged people, like, we should just give them a break because of course they act like animals. They're economically disadvantaged.
You see, you hear what Ana is saying here? This
Sure
is
does.
racism of low expectations. Like me as a white conservative, if I was to say that, I mean, people would say dog whistling, you're bigot, but now we got the young Turks saying it.
What'd she
The
say?
white liberal is viewing these people as animals. They can't help themselves. We can't hold them responsible for their actions. She's not saying that about herself. She says about the white liberals.
Like, I can't. Listen, when I was young, when I was in elementary school especially, my family was not doing well financially. It was a really difficult time. My dad lost his job. It was a struggle.
Oh, come on. Let's play a violin for Ana. You're white, Ana. Is that Ana or Ana? You're white. Don't give me the sob story of you being poor. You have white privilege, Ana. I mean, you're just ticking off these woke progressives right now with this talk. Oh, don't give me these sob stories.
Remember what Doug said about Francesca Stavrakopoulos when he defended that creepy Egyptologist? Well, Francesca wouldn't have, I don't see what's wrong with that. Francesca's an attractive person, so of course she's successful in media. I wonder why he's not saying that now here about Ana.
You're born in America as a white, beautiful woman. You got beauty privilege. You got white privilege. I mean, and your dad lost his job. Poor you.
Exactly. So why doesn't she suck it up? So why is he entertaining people that are like, 49% of you think that you feel sorry for white people. Well, white people can just suck it up. Just like all the other people that you feel sorry for or don't feel sorry for. They can just suck it up, right? If you win at life in this country, it's because the market rewarded you. And if you're poor and you suck, you didn't work hard enough. Hate to break this to Doug, but holding people responsible for their actions is exactly what restorative justice he's whining about is. Yeah.
By the way, I'm imitating the woke person on the left right now.
Let's put it that way. I knew the difference between right and wrong, and if I were bullying a student in class, there would be consequences not only with the school, but with my mother, okay? Being economically disadvantaged doesn't mean that you get to skirt consequences for your actions.
Just because you're black doesn't mean you can skirt your consequences for your actions. Just because you're Hispanic and blah, blah, blah.
Why did he just equate black and Hispanic with disadvantaged? I asked this question in here because she's making a broader point. Just because you might be disadvantaged does not mean you get to skirt consequences for acting like, being a bully. I agree. This happens plenty of times where disadvantaged white kids decide to take out their problems at home on kids at school. They shouldn't skirt that. So why did Doug just jump from disadvantaged to black or Hispanic or other.
Yeah. What Anna's doing here, without realizing it maybe, is she's blaming the parents of these minorities.
Why is she blaming the parents of minorities? She's blaming school officials for, if anything, taking it too easy on disadvantaged kids. There actually isn't really any evidence to suggest that the reason that they're going easier on these kids is because they're disadvantaged or because they're minorities, but it might be because their cultural background in Christianity and being bigoted towards LGBTQ kids reflects their Christian values, and that's why they're taking a soft touch with them. That's the impression I got from the students' paper, the students' article. And Doug's not touching that because Doug didn't read this. He didn't do the background on this.
And saying, you're bad parents.
That is not the point that she's making. Doug, you're being a flat-out bigot here.
My parents were poor, and they at least taught me right from wrong. But it seems
Of course they were poor. They were Mennonites, for God's sake.
like you didn't.
You don't understand the difference between right or wrong because you wouldn't be lying so frequently like you are here. I mean, you're contradicting yourself left and right and being a bigoted dick.
Anna is shaming black and Hispanic parents.
She's doing no such thing. I can't believe I'm coming to her defense on this. That is not her broader point. If that is her broader point in her head, she's being as big a dick as Doug is.
For bullying trans kids. Good for you, Anna. Anna, you should say on screen, my parents are better than you guys. These parents of these bullies in school. Do it.
She should not.
Shame them.
This has been a big fetish for him lately. He really wants shame to happen. That happens at the end.
Shaming and praising is like advertising. It's pushes and pulls. It works. Advertising works.
And so here, I'll give you an example. One of the staff members at the school said of the students who kept bullying the transgender students and getting away with it, I'm not saying that some of these students don't cause problems, but they are the ones who...
Jefferson Spatchcock, wait, she said disadvantaged. She didn't say black or Hispanic. The kids that are doing the bullying are the black and Hispanic kids, Jefferson.
In the student paper, some of the bullying that they claimed was being done by the advisors and the administrators there, too. Not specifically the students. And the students, it was mentioned that some of the students, the majority of the students doing the bullying were black and Hispanic. But Anna didn't say black and Hispanic. She said disadvantaged, and Doug just made that connection because he's a racist.
Do some logic.
Yeah, I had put that in there. I'm like, wait, she just said disadvantaged, and Doug equated that with black or Latino. And that's what he just reacted to right there. Hitting the mar. I got my call out and I feel good.
So
let's go forward to the part where he's talking to Sean here. There's a part where this kid flips out in a school and Doug goes on a rant about how you need to put this kid down or something like that and put him on his back.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Doug. How are you?
Good. I'm trying to figure out which Sean this is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I hear your dog. What do you want to talk about?
Daniel Cooper, you missed an opportunity to use the shame meme from Game of Thrones in the thumbnail. I don't know that I have missed it. Thanks for reminding me. It'll get used next time probably because I'm sure he's not getting off this shame kick anytime soon.
Well, I just saw the video. I do. So I went to high school. You and I are about the same age. You know that. You'll figure out who or which Sean this is pretty quick.
Yep.
So when I was in school, we had lots of kids throw fits, whether it be girls, guys, whatever, and they all had, fathers in the home. Or I don't necessarily think it's indicative that just because a kid throws a fit in school that he's fatherless, right? But well,
I mean, if he can, Sean emailed me about this part because he wanted me to ask about it because the video that he showed before that is this kid he's a high schooler, I think, and he just has a freak out and he's yelling, "How dare you talk to me? Who do you think you are?" And he's yelling at the teacher, and the teacher does the right thing. The teacher does pretty much the like, "You need to leave," and the kid's just standing there flipping out, freaking out. And Doug's talking about how this is why we need only large men in class, and they could just grab these kids and put them to the floor. Like, that's not going to cause problems. But Doug seems to think
works out
it
to
will.
your it works out to your narrative to use that and say, oh well, this kid doesn't have a father in the home because we need fathers in the home. But do you really think we need to like stack the fucking classroom with some dude that can kick every kid's ass?
Yeah, I do.
But don't you think that would take away from?
This is called the prison kind of theory behind this. Like, what you need are prison guards and wardens. Like, I think maybe PineCreek has watched the movie The Substitute a few too many times.
Because I imagine that if we like crossed all of the capable men that were able to handle every kid in class with the ability of teachers, like they would fall short, in my opinion. I would think, right?
What do you mean? Like we'd need those men in other areas in life? Is what you're saying?
No, I just don't think.
Like, you're not going to find people with those complementing skill sets, is what Sean's mentioning here. Like, you're going to find people that are actually good teachers, but are also capable and willing to occasionally just, let's go to war right there in the classroom. If Chad loses it.
Think every man that's capable of holding down, especially now, man. Have you seen some of the kids in high school? Right? Like, I wouldn't want to mess with some of these kids, much less some of the kids that I went to school with.
Oh, come on. I mean,
dude, our football team is much bigger. All of them are bigger than I am. And I'm, 5'11" and 180.
50% of juveniles incarcerated came from fatherless homes. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Children from fatherless homes represent 71% of high school dropouts. 60% of America's rapists grew up in fatherless homes.
So, of course, all these things are not just correlation, but they're also causation. So if you just get these kids their dads back, none of these other social problems that rise up in their life would ever occur, because you'd fix all of the other social ills that they have to, the other challenges they have in their life.
According to a 2016 study, father absence is tied to poor social, emotional, and academic functioning. 85% of all children who exhibit behavior disorders come from fatherless homes. 70% of juveniles in state-operated...
This just sounds like Andrew Wilson trying to do this thing. I don't know why so many conservatives now have a real problem with correlation not equaling causation and keep doing this. Yes, it is the case that in these cases, you do see a connection between a kid raised in a single-parent home without a dad, without a mom, or both, or growing up in foster care homes in some cases, being connected to all these other negative things in their lives. But this idea, like, well, okay, what we found is the linchpin. So if we just put a dad in their life to act as their basically live-in parole guard until they're mature enough to get a job and get drafted and stuff, social ills fixed. This is where he's going with this.
Fatherless homes. Fathers in the homes is what determines what type of person you're going to be in society.
If you're extrapolating that from that data, you are doing that data wrong.
Well, so I'll agree somewhat with that. I know that there are several kids that I know that turned out just fine, when
sure,
they
there's
lost
exceptions,
fathers, right? Like coming from.
Okay, so there's exceptions. So are you going to take back the bullshit that you just implied, that if you just shove a father back into that situation, none of these bad things seemingly are going to affect this kid now? Even though there's plenty of examples of kids who didn't have a dad, and none of these things affected those kids.
Well, right. And I grew up with just a father, so it was just me and dad.
Yeah, actually, growing up with just a father, you'll end up better than growing up with just a mother.
Yeah.
So is Doug then for, like, just nothing but gay dad adoptions? Because it seems to me, following his logic, if one dad is better than even having a mom, and a mom and a dad are great, two dads would be the best, right? I mean, that should work. That should do it.
Yeah, she's alive, but she's not present. But this reminds me of I do think it's a much different conversation, that one-off kid, right? But regardless, I don't think that doesn't really address the problem. It addresses a symptom. And that's typically like, how do we fix the fathers in homes, in your opinion? Like, because that is the
shame,
problem, right? Not like, so fathers should be
people
shaming,
on the left actually, I think, have a bigger responsibility than people on the right. People on the right tend to be the religious types in the United States who tend to be, I'm not saying they're perfect by any means, but they tend to have more of a nuclear family than people on the left. People on the left need to say, we're willing to shame people. People on the right are pretty good at shaming people. People on the left hate shaming
there's
people.
So much more.
Okay. If people on the left are so bad at shaming people, then why are conservatives spending so much time whining about how liberals are trying to make them guilty? Is he disassociating guilt from shame? You should be ashamed of yourself from being so successful. You should be ashamed of what you've taken advantage of with your white privilege. I don't understand why he's missing this part.
there's so much more that goes into it. Like, how many marriages do you think in the U.S., like how many homes do you think are the demographic that you're talking about, right? Like people that stay together because of Jesus, and the homes are miserable, right? Kids grow up in these terrible situations because parents don't want to be together. They stay together. They neglect the kids. They abuse the kids in various different ways, even though some of it may not be physical. I mean, you're talking about
when you have the attitude. When you have the attitude that let's do a hypothetical thought experiment where it was illegal to get divorced, unless there's extreme circumstances like real physical abuse.
This is an Andrew Wilson talking point, right?
Like
terrible.
But now let's imagine it's illegal to get divorced.
Terrible.
And basically, what is it? Something like 60, 70, 80% of all divorces are initiated by the woman. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So what?
Yeah. The majority of divorces are initiated by the wife. Yeah. So let's say we had a law that says, okay, wife, you're not happy. Suck it up, so what? Now, it's not an abusive home.
For how long and for what reason? Is the purpose of this just to make her stay there with a kid? To make the father stay with the kids? So at that point, can they cite irreconcilable differences once the kid's legally an adult and just go about their lives?
She just like doesn't feel like her husband treats her like the princess that she deserves. So
is that the reason that women are? Because the number one cited reason for divorce is a lack of commitment.
What? Suck it up. You got 18 years. You got kids. You got to tough it out for 18 years.
Okay, so you do have to tough it out for 18 years until you've produced a kid for the government that will go on and become a consumer and taxpayer for the United States. And then after that, the principle of sticking together at that point no longer matters. And so what you've done in an attempt to try to create the best environment for a kid to become a hardworking consumer and taxpayer for the country is to turn his parents into resentful fucks. Because you can't guilt people into this without creating an enormous amount of resentment. And how do you prevent them from directing that resentment, implicitly or explicitly, toward the kid you're forcing them to stay with? It's almost as if Doug doesn't understand how humans work at all. It would be easier to just give them lobotomies and then keep government monitors to watch all three of them. And you don't have to worry about it. Doug could be one of the prison guards, and you see these three people like... they're getting ready to split, and the kid's 9 years old, and he talks out of turn. All of them are getting that little mushy part removed.
Okay, which point?
My point is that when you make that decision to suck it up, Buttercup, then you basically have a roommate situation between the husband and wife, and they will make the best of it. Is that kind of
like you guys?
And they will make the best of it, sure. But how do humans cope when put in a situation that they can't stand? They resent the shit out of the people that put them in that situation. They resent the shit out of the people they associate with being the reason others put them in that position. So the only thing that you need to do to make this plan work for Doug is to disregard human privacy, free will, autonomy, and basic liberty. That's all. So you just have to fundamentally strip away the foundations of a lot of Western, and hell, even Eastern legal and cultural practices. Just a complete dismissal of basic humanity is all that's required for the kids. For the kids.
Like you and your wife?
No. I love my wife. My wife loves me. Well, of course we're roommates.
You guys are roommates?
Yeah.
I mean, she lives in a separate room. You guys are roommates.
Right, and I actually advise that for all married couples. If you want to have a more stable home, get a good night's sleep by yourself. And another area of problem in marriages is financial stress. So I've been saying this for years. Don't have kids unless you can afford them.
But I sleep better with my wife in the same room.
Well, that's because you're a girly man.
This is pathetic. He reminds me of Ned Flanders here. I sleep in a car that's shaped like a race car. You sleep in a bed shaped like a race car? And Homer's response, I sleep in a big bed with my wife. Devastating.
Oh, man.
Hey, I'll let you go. See ya.
And then he just hangs up on him. And then calls him a girly man again. So, all right, that's it for that. Let's get on to some lighter fare. I'm going to show everybody here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to save this. I was going to get into these I think I'm going to save them. I've been on for 2.5 hours. It's too much. I'm going to change the promo and show these another time, maybe on Saturday, so I can go over them, maybe at the top of the hour. Thanks, everybody, folks, for being here. Thanks, everybody in the live chat. Sorry for making this one so long. I was ranting about that one, but man, PineCreek's content just keeps getting cringier and cringier. So, all right, I am going to get out of here. Thank you very much for those of you who hung on for the entire thing. For those of you that didn't, I appreciate you hanging in for as long as you did, and don't fault you at all for leaving. And it's really looking spooky in here. I should have kept myself minimized. This camera cannot keep up with this low light. Okay, I'm going to get out of here. Catch me later. I will probably be back on Saturday morning for another show. Hopefully the sound of this is okay. I'm going to keep playing around with it and adjusting it, see if I can get it where I want it to. But all right, folks, I will catch you all later. See ya.